Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy. And man, I was off yesterday on my show. The dog was barking and barking, so hopefully she's under control. I gave her a toy. We'll see what happens.
And a sedative.
That being said, there is a ton of Canadian news today, but before we get into that, Trump met with Mamdani late in the afternoon. I seen one clip and then another, and I just kept grabbing Mamdani Trump clips because they were gold. Let's get into them.
Yes, so New York's communist mayor Zohran Mamdani met with President Trump from Eric Doherty. President Trump says Zohran Mamdani will hopefully be a really great mayor for New York City. We're going to be helping him to make everybody's dream come true, having a strong and safe New York. Now that Mamdani won, Trump just wants his original home city to succeed.
Yeah, we'll have to see what kind of happens here. I think Trump is definitely playing politics. The progressive wing of the Democratic Party, maybe he's going to try to lure some of them over to the conservatives, or maybe he's going to force the Democrats to really make them the next candidate. Now, Mamdani is an immigrant, so he wasn't born here, so he cannot be president, but AOC would be the pick for the radical wing. And if he plays buddy-buddy with Mamdani here, it may cause the Democrats to take AOC as their 2028 candidate.
Yeah.
Good for everybody. But I just want to congratulate. I think you're going to have hopefully a really great mayor. The better he does, the happier I am, I will say. There's no difference in party. There's no difference in anything. And we're going to be helping him to make everybody's dream come true, having a strong and very safe New York. And congratulations, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Please.
I appreciated the
Good for everybody.
Okay, and we got
And
about...
they cut him off right before he talked, luckily.
Well, we got about 4 clips, so we're going to get into all of them. Some of them are just classic gold and comedy on top of that, but let's go right into the second clip, maybe.
Because Trump is very funny, and people forget that. From Disclosed TV, Trump on Mamdani, I can tell you some of my views have changed, and we've had discussions on some things. I'm not going to discuss what they were, but very confident that he can do a very good job. It seems like he's playing like 4D or 5D on some kind of chess.
And you really have to think that because the socialist wing of the Liberal Party is really creeping in on liberalism, and that's the most radical wing. The same thing is happening
on the Democrats, not just liberalism.
The same thing is happening on the conservative side. So maybe he's going to try to reach out an olive branch before the next election. Who knows?
Because we also know, and you discussed it yesterday, that Mark Mitchell from Rasmussen, who's a pollster who came out with these figures on the Alex Jones show, saying that a lot of young people, especially Gen Z voters, are veering off towards a more socialism style of governance that they want. So,
well, we also have we are on where the House and the Senate actually took a vote on saying no to socialism, which was out of nowhere, and it doesn't really do much. So they're definitely aware of the threat from both the left and the right. The classic Democrats and the classic Republicans are, I think, really fearing the socialist wing of both of their parties right now.
And Zohran Mamdani did come up thanks to the Democrat Socialists of America, and that long forgotten party that apparently is gaining traction as well.
Describe why you feel that way, and also will you do anything to stop him from?
Oh, we didn't discuss your second part of the question, and on your.
Okay, the second part of the question was, will he allow Zohran Mamdani to arrest Netanyahu if he comes to New York? He said we didn't discuss that part of the question. It was kind of hard to hear the reporter there.
First part, I mean, he's got views a little out there, but who knows? I mean, we're going to see what works, or he's going to change also. We all change. I changed a lot from when I first came to office. It's now quite a while ago. It's quite a while. My first term was great. We had the greatest economy in the history of our country. We're doing even better now. We're doing much better now than we did even the first term. And I can tell you some of my views have changed. And we had discussions on some things. I'm not going to discuss what they were, but that I feel very confident that he can do a very good job. I think he's going to be. I think he is going to surprise some conservative people, actually, and some very liberal people. He won't surprise them because they already like him.
Okay, and yeah, we're going to have a couple more clips here, but it's very interesting. I think Trump's going to let him try his ideas, knowing they're not going to work, and when they don't work, we're going to kind of have to see what happens. This is definitely political 4D chess. Nobody expected this meeting to go as well as it went. It seemed to go absolutely fantastic from both Trump's side and Zohran's side. They both had incredible things to say. The next clip, though, is pure comedy.
Not yet, but also let's not forget that Mamdani, right after he won, and we played the clip, he came out with his new ad asking people for donations and for money. And we have spoken about how what Mamdani and other socialists, communists, etc., might want to, or their plan might be, is to get just the city or whatever they're working on, the communist or socialist side of it, working by getting donations and an influx of money that used to go to USAID might now be going to making an effort to make it on the surface seem like it's working, and then get more and more people enthusiastic about that coming to them as well. But then we know in the long run, and we know there's a billion reasons why socialism and communism doesn't work, especially on a really big scale, in all scales.
But I will say this, maybe he is reaching out an olive branch. The Democrats are global socialism. That's what they're doing, and it's not going to work on a global scale. Trump's a nationalist. Maybe Zoran's more of a nationalist socialist, because in another clip, Trump's going to say they agreed on a lot. So maybe they focused on their national policies that they can work together on. And maybe that's how he's going to reach an olive branch out to that wing of the Democratic Party.
Because the new Democrat Party is becoming more and more towards the crazies and the progressive wing of it and the socialists.
But those socialists are global socialists, and global socialism isn't going to work. If they want to actually point to something that's going to work, they're going to have to focus on nationalized socialism, and they know Trump is a nationalist, so possibly.
Let's remember what National Socialism actually means. It's Yahtzees. But from Cam Higbee, President Trump says he would feel comfortable in New York City under a Mamdani administration. He used to call New York City home because New York City was essentially him. He used to call New York City home. Would you feel comfortable living in New York City under a Mamdani administration? Apparently, he says he would feel very comfortable.
Different address nowadays than you used to. Like, you used to call New York City home. Would you feel comfortable living in New York City under a Mamdani administration?
Yeah, I would. I really would. Especially after the meeting. Absolutely.
What makes you comfortable?
We agree on a lot more than I would have thought. I think I want him to do a great job, and we'll help him do a great job. He may have different views, but in many ways, we were discussing when Bernie Sanders was out of the race, I picked up a lot of his votes, and people had no idea, because he was strong on not getting ripped off in trade and lots of the things that I've practiced and been very successful on. Tariffs, a lot of things. Bernie Sanders and I agreed on much more than people thought. And when he was put out of the race, I think quite unfairly, if you want to know the truth, many of the Bernie Sanders voters voted for me. And I felt very comfortable, frankly, in seeing that and saying that. And, it just turned out to be a statistical truth. But no, I feel very comfortable. I would feel very, very comfortable being in New York. And I think much more so after the meeting. Yes.
And that wasn't the one that was actually comedy, but let's talk about that clip. There's been multiple clips now going around of interviewers asking Bernie Sanders, do you think Trump took this policy, and this policy? And his answer was yes. Trump implemented a lot of socialist policies, a lot of Bernie Sanders policies. People don't really realize this because he's framing it as capitalism and nationalism, but really they're socialist policies put forth by Bernie Sanders. So possibly Zohran Mamdani and him actually do agree on a lot of these protectionist policies if they create a social safety net.
Yes. It was funny to see Mamdani just standing there like a little kid.
Well,
they actually didn't want to say anything.
He actually did say a bunch,
Yes.
but all the best clips were really of Trump.
Yes.
So that's why I grabbed those ones.
But now the comedy one, reporter asks Zohran Mamdani, are you affirming you think President Trump is a fascist? Let's see what Trump says before he even lets Mamdani answer.
Are you affirming that you think President Trump is a fascist?
I've spoken about.
That's okay. You can just say yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay. It's easier. It's easier than explaining it. I don't know.
Are you affirming that you think?
And he's just showing his dominance there and his years of experience on, comparatively to Mamdani.
And I don't think Trump is completely against socialism. Like I said, he took some of Bernie Sanders' policies, but he thinks socialism overall, especially the way Mamdani looks at it, is no way. But he's going to have Mamdani fail at a lot of these things, have a reality check, and then see how they can actually work together on realistic policies that the government's kind of already implementing, like the food program, maybe cleaning that up, like Medicare. Medicare in the United States, 50% of the budget goes to that, and they have a shitty healthcare system compared to how much money they're actually spending on it.
And let's also not forget, we saw him saying that he would be happy to live under Mamdani in Mamdani's New York. But we have seen, and there have been a lot of reports about an exodus of millionaires and billionaires from New York because of the new tax policies that that Mamdani is planning to implement. So again, I do think it's more of a 4D chess move. Watch them fail, and then we'll continue to comment on it from Trump rather than and trying to play nice as well, because it doesn't. Right now with the youth and the Gen Z, and I mean, he got a lot of votes from young people, but also from new incomers to New York. Incomers, like people that just moved in the past 5 years to New York. Mamdani got a lot of votes from them. So maybe he is trying to, just play nice for now and then really go hard at it.
Yeah, I mean, you can say this and that. People would have classified Bernie Sanders as a hardcore socialist, and Trump just sat from the outside, watched what policies were actually good, able to be implemented, that weren't completely radical, and implemented those policies and got a lot of those voters. Maybe he's going to let Mamdani fail at a lot of this radical socialism stuff that he wants to implement, and then take the actual good policies that work on the national stage before the Democrats can even have power. That way he can say, I've already implemented these policies.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, okay. And yeah, just the article saying that they met and they agree on more than he would have thought. And again, maybe it could be 4D chess. It could be that they do actually agree.
Well, also, he doesn't want to go to war with Mamdani before the midterms. I mean,
Yes.
Mamdani's not going to succeed or fail on anything before the midterms, but he does have a lot of traction in the media's eyes. So maybe actually playing nice with him is the best thing to do before the midterms.
And Trump and the Republicans and the MAGA, the America First, everybody that's infighting right now on the conservative side has to remember that the midterms, they had to start like 2 months ago, preparing for that. Instead, they continue to fight. They continue to have Israel derangement syndrome. And was it this person that ended Charlie Kirk or that person? And there's all these mysteries, and they're all fighting with each other, and Nick Fuentes, etc. So focus on the midterms. And I think that's what Trump is starting to try to do, at least, and to start actually enacting the things with Venezuela, with Mexico, with the actual things that he can then point to and say, see, this is what we have done. This is what the crazy Democrats have done. And that is a much better path, because we also saw on one of the first clips, Trump saying, oh, the economy is doing great, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of Gen Z, I've seen a lot of commentary from Gen Z in the States saying, we don't want to be gaslit about the economy. It's not actually doing well. And it would better serve them and better serve the party and the midterms if they just admitted that the economy is not as good, but these are the plans and this is a management strategy that is going to work on the further long run of Trump's
presidency. I would kind of disagree, because the economy is doing great compared to when Biden was in there. The thing is, you're not going to be able to flip it overnight.
But that's the thing. A lot of people are waiting for it to be flipped overnight, and it just doesn't work like that.
But inflation was going out of control until Trump took office. Now it's still going up, but not at the same rate. Jobs, there's a lot more job openings. Ford just said there was over 1 million openings at their company alone. They are getting rid of a lot of immigrants, which is like really focusing on Americans getting placed in those jobs. That being said, he's going to have to focus on these midterms. We know he's aware of it because he's been bringing people in, like the pollster we talked about yesterday, into the White House saying, why don't they see what we're doing? I'm bringing trillions of dollars into the country from a capitalistic level. Trump is doing a fantastic job. The problem is you're having a lot of socialists from the both left and the right bring in socialist policies.
Which is insane to hear, socialists from the right, but yeah, essentially.
But it's happening, and we've kind of showed the clips. So he's going to have to kind of do something here.
It's capitalist, not capitalistic. Rafa says, hello, nice outfits. Thank you.
Okay, let's go into the next story. And the next story,
and this is all yours.
I kind of just put this one in here before we get to a lot of the Canadian news. There was a ton of Canadian news, surprisingly. But Jake Paul has a fight coming up. He was originally supposed to fight on Netflix, somebody that was almost half his size. Now he's fighting somebody that's double his size and with a much better resume. It's expected Jake Paul is going to get absolutely killed in this fight. It's going to probably be one of the biggest fights. It's not pay-per-view, but in Netflix history or in televised history, because everybody knows Jake Paul is going to get killed, and that's what people want to tune in for. That's what people tune into most of his fights for, but there was nobody that could do this. This was the first time they went face to face, and there is a huge size discrepancy, almost 50 pounds of pure muscle.
So Do you want to explain who Jake Paul and who Anthony Joshua is? Because then maybe people don't have no idea.
Well, Jake Paul has been boxing, trying to build up his resume for the last about 2 years. He was a social influencer before that. Anthony Joshua is actually one of the best heavyweights of modern times, and he's absolutely huge. The fact that Jake Paul decided to fight him, I think this is a win for Jake Paul if he can just last 4 or 5 rounds and maybe kind of run from him to kind of prove himself, because at least it's a bigger guy. The original guy Jake Paul was supposed to fight was half of his size, and there wasn't really much to win with Jake Paul winning that fight. With this fight, even if Jake Paul loses, but he has a good showing, it may be a win for him.
And you're interested to know a lot about MMA, boxing, etc., because it's something you used to do as well.
Yeah,
and you have a lot of knowledge about that. It's not just like you threw it up there.
No, I watch a lot of fights. I'm a big fan. I used to teach jiu-jitsu and be very big into MMA. That being said, this is going to be a huge step up, I think, just by numbers wise, and the framing of where boxing and mixed martial arts is going is more into the free model. We see the UFC going over to Paramount and going to CBS, which that's going to get rid of their pay-per-view model. We see this particular fight free on Netflix if you already have Netflix. The numbers this is going to get is absolutely insane. The last fight on Netflix was Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. Jake Paul went kind of easy on him and didn't knock him out in the last couple rounds. Mike Tyson looked extremely old, and it wasn't a good matchup. That being said, that was crashing the Netflix system, and it was really hard to watch this fight. So hopefully Netflix is a lot better prepared this time around. But let's play the clip and see how big the size difference actually is here.
On Netflix.
Size discrepancy.
But even all of them are even shorter. How tall is he?
The one guy, I think Anthony Joshua is 6'5". I think Jake Paul's 6 foot. Jake Paul just makes the heavyweight limit at 200. Even if he fattens himself up to 220, it's not going to be an athletic 220. Anthony Joshua is almost 260, pure muscle. Yeah, and Anthony Joshua actually lost his last fight. He was looking for a tune-up fight, and he wasn't going to get it paid a lot. Jake Paul got in negotiations with him. This fight is going to pay a ton of money for him for a tune-up. Wait for Anthony Joshua to get paid in a tune-up fight.
Every time I see like people do these like face-offs, I just want to go like and see what they do to each other.
I believe that fight's going to be coming in December, so...
Yeah, Friday, December 19th. But it is interesting to talk about it. I mean, again, you would know more about it. And in my Spanish show, people keep asking me to talk more about entertainment and stuff and wokeness, etc. It is interesting how it has moved a lot more towards the world of MMA, UFC, boxing. And I'm sure American football and all the baseball, etc. still have big audiences. But I do think they got impacted by the woke mind virus that tried to consume everything, and kind of DEI as well in a weird way. But do you think it'll continue to ramp up, or do you think the sports are coming back?
I don't think DEI or wokeness really infected fight sports. It was the one thing that was not infected by that. Right. That being said, the model is in absolute huge influx. There is a ton of money.
Demand.
There is a ton of money in sports, not just from the fans, but through the cable, from the cable side or the provider side, like Netflix, Paramount Plus, CBS, whoever it is, because with live sports, you can put live commercials in there rather than it being recorded and people taking out the commercials. Because it's live, people want to tune in live before the results come in. That makes the commercials a lot more valuable on live sporting events.
And because of AI, people are moving away from the TV shows, the movies, etc., or will continue to move away. And I think the industry does see that and is fearful of that. So they have invested, a lot of them, and I talked yesterday in WDW Pro about how much investment it has been made into live sports, because that is the one thing you can't really, like, you do need the humans to be there, and you do need the actual effort from the humans, because you can make up a fight on AI, but it doesn't have the same impact. And especially with more masculine sports like UFC, boxing, etc. I mean, it's essentially just two guys pitting each other. You could just go to a bar and get two people to fight each other. Essentially, it's the same thing. I think
But it's
that
not that it
attracts
sells
an
the-
audience that wouldn't be attracted by, TV shows or AI slop, as a lot of other audiences like women, etc., are and will continue to be.
Yeah, this is definitely the male audience, and the male audience is willing to pay for big event sports like this. I used to watch a lot of movies, so I had Netflix and a lot of the streaming services. Over the last few years, I'm watching a lot less. The one thing I'm willing to buy either Paramount Plus or Netflix for are these big fights. And then I just tend to keep them, especially if they have one every few months. With Paramount Plus specifically, every single month, they're going to be playing the UFC. They're going to have the tentpole events on CBS. With Netflix, I'm willing to buy it because I want to see these big sporting events here. It doesn't cost that much, especially when you compare it to the old pay-per-view model. One fight would cost between $70 and $100. You're getting these streaming services for $5 to $10. For fight fans, it's a cost-benefit analysis, and it's definitely worth just to keep the service if they provide a fight or two every couple months.
Also, especially because I keep forgetting to unsubscribe from a lot of the services. We just get into to watch one thing, and then we still have HBO
Well,
Max,
I will say one more thing, and that
which
is,
I don't really watch.
and that is, I don't know how much they're getting paid for this particular fight, but even if each fighter gets $30 million, that's $60 million, and then they pay another $10 million for the production company and the stadium. That comes to a $70 million cost. But the amount of subscribers they're going to get into that, a big tentpole movie costs $100 million, and there's no guarantee that's going to bring a mass amount of subscribers. And it's also hard to promote. With these fights, Jake Paul and Anthony Joshua on their own are both promoting that. It's going to bring a lot of eyeballs to Netflix, a lot of new subscriber base that just aren't going to unsubscribe.
And also speaking of, and especially yesterday with WWE Pro, also speaking of how movie theaters are losing and losing and losing audiences and people that are willing to pay. I'm sure even with the Netflix subscription, if Netflix wanted to do a live watching event or just any other fight here in Mexico, I don't know if they did it in the States or in Canada, but in Mexico, they used to play Monday Night Football at cinemas and at theaters, and
Yeah,
people get snacks, and some of them can
doesn't
get
work well.
alcohol. It wouldn't work well for a fight?
It doesn't work well at theaters. People prefer to go
Or
out.
they could fight each other as well.
People prefer to go out to bars, so bars will typically have these events. People want to be at a place that's comfortable to eat and drink. It's not comfortable in a theater to be drinking alcohol and things like that, and then you're closely packed into people you don't know. It can get rowdy. People can start throwing popcorn. It's not exactly the place you want to be. Most, and especially because it's geared towards males, most males would rather go to a bar. Even after I stopped drinking, I've been drinking for quite a while now, years and years, and I would still go to a bar to watch the fights. So I think bars kind of have it cornered, and it's a lot cheaper for bars now because they used to have to pay for a licensing fee for every person that would walk in the door. It would end up being thousands of dollars for a bar to play these fights. But now with Netflix, it's a lot cheaper for them. It's extremely cost efficient to bring in large crowds for these fight nights.
And now moving on to Canada, because I ran out of questions to ask you about this subject. So let's move on to Canada and its insanity. We haven't talked about Canada in a while. If you don't know, we used to live in Canada. I'm from Mexico, lived there for 13 years, and then we moved over here when the government was clearly unrepairable at this point.
Well, and we do keep up on a lot of Canadian news, and I didn't really hear any big things, but Canada just kept popping up on all these small stories. So I figured I'll put them all together in a big thread today for a segment of the show. There is a lot of international news after this Canadian news, but quite a few big Canadian stories came up.
But especially because a lot of news from Canada and the craziness goes pretty much unreported. In Canada, the only people that are able to push out these kinds of stories and with the correct lens are independent journalists or like Rebel News, Juno News, etc., which are all independent because everything that comes from mainstream news in Canada is subsidized by the government. So they don't want their mistakes to be, thrown out there.
Did you take off the JD Vance story?
No.
Is that this one? Because that was supposed to open up the Canadian news with the JD Vance story.
No, sorry.
Just because
now I have to look for
it kind of sits what's going on in Canada with these tariff negotiations, the direction they're going with their economy and their government. And now with a figure like JD Vance putting out a statement like this, when they've been kind of cut off from these tariff negotiations, it looks like they're going to go directly into the North American Free Trade Agreement negotiations that they have. Though there's still another year or so on that contract, but if they don't get that renegotiated, they're going to be in a lot of problems.
I found it from Mr. Sunshine Baby. JD Vance speaks the truth to Canadians and gives Liberals a much needed reality check. Says with your stagnant living standards have nothing to do with Trump or whatever boogeyman the CBC, that is a Canadian broadcast company, tells you to blame. And says, with all due respect to my Canadian friends whose politics focus obsessively on the United States, your stagnating living standards have nothing to do with Donald Trump or whoever the boogeyman the CBC tells you to blame. The fault lies with your leadership elected by you.
And this is the lead candidate for whoever comes after Trump. Now, yes, the Democrats might win the midterms. They could possibly win in 2028. But JD Vance is the front runner. And you're going to want to listen to what he says. He has a big say of what the Trump administration is currently doing. Trump really respects him, gets along with him. Trump's sons get along with him. So even if JD Vance doesn't want to be very aggressive with Donald Trump, he can very often talk to his sons and have his sons relay that messaging to Trump. So I would say JD Vance's opinion of Canada is as important, if not more important than Trump. And the way things are going in Canada right now, I mean, we're going to get into the articles, but the economy is not going well. They continue to go on the path of self-destruction.
Man, policies of self-destruction. So from Kirk Lubimov, Canada's chain mass citizenship handouts Bill C3 passed its third reading in the Senate, and the Canadian citizenship is about to lose all value. Mass immigration was bad, and this is that, but on steroids, handing foreigners that have almost nothing to do with Canada and their families' citizenships and access to all the paid services without paying a single cent in taxes or contributing to Canada. No one knows the true liability here, but Canada can be effectively insolvent with passing this bill.
Yeah,
That is Bill C3.
And it's very interesting because the Canadian people keep voting against immigration. They may be for a lot of the other liberal policies, but immigration is absolutely destroying the country. And then it's really stretching their social services, not only thin, but to the breaking point, whether that's healthcare, Social Security, the food banks. What would be the equivalent to SNAP in Canada is extremely thin. The type of foreigners they're now allowing into the country are just getting on these benefits and riding the system for everything they can. It used to never be like that. Canada used to have one of the best immigration systems in the world. The United States, the UK, the EU used to look at the Canadian model of immigration because they knew exactly the holes in the Canadian economy and would invite specifically those type of well-educated immigrants in to kind of take up what do you call it when you take up the Canadian
Oath?
No,
What are you talking about?
nothing. Let's
I was
just keep
looking for just like a backgrounder on what Bill C3 is. So the government is introducing legislation to make the citizenship process as fair and transparent as possible. Bill C3 would automatically remedy the status of any person who would be a citizen today were it not for the first generation limit or certain outdated previous provisions of former citizenship legislation. Establish a new framework for citizenship by descent going forward that would allow for access to citizenship beyond the first generation based on a Canadian parent's substantial connection to Canada.
Yeah, so basically anybody in your family or any extended relatives, they're trying to extend this out to allow more immigration. People are looking very closely at student immigration because it was extremely abused, not only by the government, by the schools themselves. Fake schools were popping all over, basically called the diploma mills, that you would go to this fake school and then apply through citizenship for that. But a lot of these niche ways to get immigrants into the country have kind of been exposed. The government is currently trying to play a shell game, especially with Trump in the United States putting pressure on them about their immigration policies. And they're trying to find shifty ways to get more and more immigrants into the country. And extended family is one of those ways.
Well, and as we saw on Monday, they also came out to say that at the Canadian border, they won't really be checking people because they don't have enough staff to go through all people. So essentially, Canada's door is wide open. And with international students specifically, yes, they tried to amend that and make it better, but it's still going on. And it's not just unfair to the Canadian citizens and students, but also to the people that get duped into going to Canada under false pretenses with false promises and end up having to live 20 students in a basement somewhere off in Coquitlam and then going to a school that doesn't even exist or that is a tiny room where they're just pretending. And they also get the benefit of being able to have a job while they study. So most people are also just doing that, end up having to do that because they can't afford life in Canada.
Well, you also have to think that the government's talking out both sides of their mouth here. They're saying AI is going to be taking a lot of jobs within these countries. So there won't be as many jobs available. Large portions of different sectors AI is taking over. If that's the case, why are you flooding more immigrants into a country when there's going to be less jobs overall? That being said, you can just look at Canadian GDP. It goes up, but per capita, how much money each person makes in Canada is headed the opposite direction. So you're basically making a generation of serfs. This is what I would say, especially about the American immigration as well. If AI is really taking over large portions of these industries, you need to get rid of some people. So if you have illegal immigrants, get rid of them. So then most of your citizens in the country will have jobs. Otherwise, there's going to be animosity and a lot of other problems that come up within the country.
Especially if you have an idiot for prime minister, which is Mark Carney, and he continues to say things and indebt Canada more than it already is. From Mark Nixon, Mark Carney's speech live in the UAE. Wait a second, did Mark Carney just say he plans to invest $2 trillion from Canadian pension funds into the UAE after promising $1 trillion to the US? That's $3 trillion in total, and his math isn't mathing.
And we'll listen to the clip in a minute, but let's just realize this. Canada does their books different than every other country in the world. Again, they're playing a shell game with their money. They're calling their pension fund an asset. They're putting it on their asset books to make it look like the country's more successful than it is.
And they're putting it up on different stock markets as well. And they've lost a lot of money by doing that.
Well, they're not putting it into the Canadian economy. They're putting it to every other economy around the world. And this is why the Canadian economy is struggling. And you also put it into the stock market. That is a huge risk to pensioners. So the fact that he's going to invest $2 trillion possibly in the UAE, and then he said the other day another trillion in America. What about Canada?
Yeah. He's missing one country there.
Do you not believe in Canada? Because his own assets, people have kind of looked into it, and he's invested into America to the hilt, not Canada.
Into America and into gas and petroleum. So,
speaking for Canada, we're AAA rated. We're fiscally disciplined, financially resilient, and we are anchored in the rule of law. Over the next year, we will take significant measures to elevate our relationship. The Minister of Finance will lead a delegation of Canada's pension funds, $2 trillion of capital, which almost begins to sound significant in the UAE. $2 trillion in capital, the Canadian pension funds. They will come here next year early to deepen existing partnerships and develop new investment opportunities together. Canada's Minister of International Trade will also lead a business delegation here in January with companies from our energy, AI, infrastructure, and agriculture sectors. We welcome UAE investors to visit Canada. I will personally host them to explore investment in Canada's transformative projects. I'm pleased that we're going to add more direct commercial flights between our nations, increasing tourism, cargo, trade. I suspect they won't be enough, so we'll add more. Mila is launching a new partnership with the UAE's Technology Innovation Institute to advance research on AI architecture and open a lab at Mila's facility in Montreal. And this builds on our nascent cooperation in AI and cyber, including BlackBerry's new partnership with the UAE's Cybersecurity Council. There's more to come. I'm pleased that an agreement valued over $1 billion that's in the process of being finalized will expand critical minerals processing capacity in Canada, creating jobs, boosting long-term supply of minerals essential to energy technologies and advanced manufacturing. More on that soon. Now, I'm going to reiterate my...
And it does seem like more than before, before Mark Carney came in, because Canada was already doing it as a country. But now with Mark Carney, it really does seem like the U.S.'s little brother trying to mimic all his steps and trying to do the exact same thing that Trump has been doing, because he just met with the UAE and with other Arab countries to continue to build partnership. And now Canada is going right behind doing that. Also, Mark Carney was chasing Trump around Asia, also trying to do the exact same things that Trump, the deals that Trump was doing.
I agree with that, but he's not doing what Trump is doing because he can't get the private market to invest in Canada. He's giving Canadian pension funds and Canadian investments to all these other companies, hoping they'll reciprocate, but they're just not doing it. Also, he's refusing to actually tap into Canada's natural resources, whether that's lumber, electricity, oil, natural gas, things like this. But he's going to oil-rich countries like the UAE, like Saudi Arabia, investing trillions and asking for money and loans back in return. Well, just tap into your own country's natural resources rather than going to these other countries that are already tapping into their natural resources.
But not only that, they continue on their quest to censor those that want to point out how insane and ridiculous this is. And we've seen them trying to censor independent journalists, but also citizens. And they continue to pass, enact, and propose legislation that would continue their censorship regime. And as we saw it with Bill C-63, now they're amending it, which is the Online Harms Act. They're amending it, but it's even worse. It's just getting a new name.
And 1 second, if you did watch my show yesterday, they had put up a grade school kid to give this propaganda and say we need the government and big tech to protect us by censoring the internet. And basically stripping all citizens' freedoms in order to protect the children. And now they got her given this speech, which kind of just backs that up. Canada is really a socialist experiment, much like the EU, but when socialism fails, rather than going back to capitalism, they go full force into communism. And that's the big thing with these socialist wings of both the Democratic and Republican parties in the States. If they go down that path and it fails, they're not going to go backwards. They're going to go forwards into communism, into censorship, and start stripping freedoms from their citizens in order to make communism work.
And into expanding the government and expanding government power, which censorship really helps to do.
Well, and it's the most dangerous time that communism really has in all of history because of digital ID, because of digital currency. And that's what makes socialism so potentially dangerous at this particular point in time.
But from Mark Nixon, the government is going full tilt on the Online Censorship Act, Bill C-63, revived as same bill, new name. People are nuts. Must be stopped.
And thank you for joining us today on National Child Day, a day meant to honor the rights of Canada's 8 million children. My name is Andrea Chrysanthu, and I'm chair of the board for Children First Canada. Today should be a day of celebration. Instead, we're here to sound the alarm. Across this country, children are being exploited, extorted, bullied, manipulated, and exposed to dangers that no child should ever face.
And as we've said, children and children's safety, online safety, is only one of the excuses they use, but they always try to go along the line of safety, security, be it online, be it at the border. And that is the thing to watch out. Yes, we want safety and security for children online, but this is not the way to go about it, and the government is not the way to ask for these measurements to be put in place.
Well, and we have to remember the U.S. administration is putting a ton of pressure on these countries that are trying to bring censorship in. They don't like it, but these countries are just going full steam ahead. Canada, the UK, and the EU especially. And they're trying to ban a lot of social media platforms or what can be shown on those platforms. So they're trying to censor the Americans by putting monetary consequences on it.
All because the digital spaces they occupy every day are not designed with their safety in mind. We've waited years for action. In that time, too many kids have been hurt, too many families shattered, and too many preventable tragedies have occurred. We're here today because, make no mistake, Canada's children are in danger, and the clock is ticking. At 12 noon, we will launch the Countdown for Kids, a 40-day national call for Parliament to act, because we cannot start another year sacrificing one more child to online harms.
And child protection. The Canadian government has been stripping parental rights in mass over the last decade, and now they're trying to step in and be the parent and saying we have to censor everything, including the adults, in order to protect the children. This could have been solved very easily by having the parents do their actual job.
And it's not just stripping parental rights to mutilate children, all in the name of gender ideology. The Canadian government has done that and has advocated for that and helped put parents in jail that wanted to prevent their child from being harmed by the government itself.
Most importantly, This movement is being driven by parents who have tragically lost their children to online harms, and by children and youth who experience these issues every day, who have been bravely advocating with the government to ensure children's rights to safety, dignity, and protection are upheld. We're asking the government to retable the Online Harms Act and rename it the Online Safety Act before midnight on December 31st. And we're calling on every member of parliament and every senator across all party lines to treat this as the national emergency that it is.
And same as with gender ideology, and there was the idiot kid that spoke yesterday, but same as with gender ideology, they continue to use the whole slide argument of like children are going to take their lives. They have been taking their lives. That's the exact same playbook that they use for the gender ideology thing.
Well, this bill was put up originally in this huge draconian bill, and now it got actually knocked down. So they divided it into all these little smaller bills, and they're trying to push them all forward. But it would accomplish the same thing, and that is mass censorship in Canada of the entire population. They're trying to say for children's safety, but they're given a million other excuses. The people do not want this. The people don't want digital ID, digital currency, or censorship.
And just quickly to touch on, this is from before when it was first being proposed, Bill C-63. And again, they want to amend the name. It's just going to be the exact same bill. They haven't proposed any substantial changes, especially to the most egregious parts. And this is from BC Liberties Union, I think, yes. According to Part 3 of Bill C-63, complainants could request to be anonymous or could potentially include a larger number of people who see a viral post. While the tribunal's monetary rewards could rise up to $20,000, there's real danger that people will use the new provision to gain money or carry out a grudge. This is, again, people can complain anonymously if they disagree or feel harmed by anything they see online or any actor, anyone that they see posting online, any post they see online. Similar to what happens in the UK when you get imprisoned for, what's it called?
Well, and
I forgot the name. What is it called?
I don't know.
Hate speech. Hate speech.
They're also tabling another bill to ban people from the internet. And what happens if people actually work on the internet in the name of hate speech? So if they don't like something you say, they're going to get cell phone providers to ban you from the internet. And if you work online, then how are you going to make money? You own nothing and you will be happy is quickly becoming a reality within Canada.
And this is why freedom of speech is the number one thing to sustain a democracy, because as soon as you're not able to speak your mind, speak against the government, speak up against the government, then you lose every other single right and freedom that you're supposed to have and that the government is supposed to work to continue to ensure for you. However, now people want to give over their civil liberties and their freedoms to the government, entrench the government and make it bigger, let them censor and control you, and at the same time, just say thank you.
Well, I often say Western governments, but it's really these Western governments that have dabbled in socialism and really going down this path of socialism. It's starting to fail. And when it fails, rather than go back and open up free speech, they're trying to push it forward to communism with digital ID, digital currency, and censorship.
And at the same time, with the kids thing specifically, as you say, it is and should fall on the parents, maybe in some way on the provider itself or social media networks. But again, I don't believe that it should be the parents' right and responsibility to take care of their own children. And if they're noticing a pattern of that kids, something strange is happening online with the kids, then act and be it's the government's duty to allow that space for the parent to actually act. Because I think what the government wants to do is to parent the children themselves and the parents themselves.
Well, it's obvious that's what they want to do.
And take away their responsibilities as well of them as citizens within the social contract of the country.
That being said, you can't strip all freedoms from your citizens, or you can't strip massive amounts of freedoms from your citizens in the name of protecting children. This is the play they're trying to use around the world. They just did this in Australia. They're bringing in a digital ID on that basis. Canada is now trying to bring in censorship on this. From multiple points, the EU, the UK, Australia, and Canada are all working together to put pressure on social media companies, saying we won't allow you into our countries if you don't censor these things. So we'll see if these US social media companies actually bend the knee to them. And they're also, on another level, offering their citizens' data to these social media companies too, so that they can train their AIs. So in exchange for censorship, it's going to be very interesting what happens over the next few years.
And Rafa says, what are the penalties in Canada for misgendering? And they do exist, unfortunately. And I just quickly looked this up because misgendering is a human rights violation. Canadian court rules. This is from 2021.
Your own child, the Canadian government will take your child away from you. This is a common thing that happens in Canada. So it's one thing if you misgender a stranger, but if you start misgendering your child, the government does not look kindly on that. They think they should become the parent at that point, and you lose all parental rights. But let's continue to go into the article there.
Hold on, I'm looking it up.
There's also huge fines. I believe it's around a $20,000 to $30,000 fine for misgendering somebody. A cop did this to somebody on the street that looked like a man, yet that was a man. They said they identified him as a man. They said, no, their pronouns are female. How is the cop supposed to even know that? But then they got multiple $30,000 court cases thrown at them.
Well, it's even worse because in Canada, if you dead name or if you misgender someone, you go up against the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, and they are the ones that are able to case specifically decide what penalties, be them financial or like putting you in jail for X amount of time. So it varies, which is even worse. There was one penalty though that was awarded to a person that got misgendered for $18,000, but then there's also $2,500 that has been awarded out. So it depends on essentially the judge that you get and the severity of how terrible your act
on top of that, they were trying to give 20-year penalties in jail for misgendering. Luckily it got knocked down, but there are still severe penalties in Canada for misgendering, and they keep trying to sneak it in these other bills, these hate bills or these hate speech bills, where if you use hate speech by misgendering somebody, they're trying to smuggle in large amounts of time, whether it's between 10 and 20 years in Canada. Luckily, people are noticing these and they're getting knocked down, but you can still serve time in jail for misgendering.
And it did happen. I went to the court case for a father that was using the correct pronouns and name for his daughter that he was trying to save from the gender indoctrination. And he ended up being put in jail and in a giant court case with the BC courts, but also with several outlets that were trying to twist the story around. And luckily, Billboard Chris and Rebel News picked up the story as well. And I was in court with them when they sent him to jail for using his daughter's correct name.
It's also very interesting how this is being weaponized within family court. Very often, mothers will encourage their children to either change genders or to become a they, them. That way, they can then take that into the court, saying the father isn't respecting it, because many times the fathers aren't willing to go along with it. And then they get full custody and the father gets no visitation as well as a financial penalty. So it's being weaponized on every level.
And Psychic listening with the headset. Wow, the fluid group of complainers playbook. Yes. But also, I think you explained it a bit better than me. What's happening with Indigenous rights and the whole land grabbing and taking away of private property via wokeism, essentially.
It continues on. I mean, this is going to be the landmark case on how you take private citizens' land from them. I didn't know if I had an article on this today, but this is something I'm completely, and I keep covering. Within Canada,
yes, there's a post, so I want you to.
Within Canada, there's all kinds of cases now popping up. They've set the original precedent. If the Supreme Court backs that up, it now becomes law where they can take land from private citizens, give it back to Indigenous tribes from the United States on the border in Washington, Montana, in Alaska, are all saying they own part of Canada now. A lot of these Canadian tribes there's multiple tribes with multiple interests over the same land. They're both making land claims. Some of these tribes are saying they own entire cities of skyscrapers and everything that is built upon these. They're saying you don't necessarily have to give us the land, but you do have to give us billions of dollars if you want to continue to live on this land.
And this all came about through a court case from British Columbia, which is where we used to live in Vancouver. This happened in Richmond, and now is also happening in Kamloops, where these Indigenous tribes are now claiming the land is theirs and that they are owned it.
No, it didn't just happen that these Indigenous tribes magically did this.
Yes.
Privately and secretively, the provincial government in BC specifically worked with the United Nations to bring in these crazy laws that said that they could take private property away from citizens and give them to these indigenous tribes. Then they proceeded to prosecute these cases, set the precedent, and now this could become law across all of Canada. So it's actually the United Nations working in conjunction with the provinces and these tribes. And there's a whole industry now kind of popping up to help these indigenous tribes file these claims because it's worth billions and billions of dollars.
And it's, again, not only in the US and anywhere where we've seen these land acknowledgements in Canada. I heard them since I got there, where it's essentially citizens saying, this is the indigenous tribe's land and I'm just here and I'm just, we took the land. And it's all, woke, self-berating. But it's not only Canada, because there are multiple places around the world, multiple countries around the world that have started with this playbook, like Australia. Mexico is also starting. And I wouldn't be surprised, again, given that it seems to be at least part of a UN project, of it spreading quickly around the world in any other places where indigenous tribes and indigenism is cropping up and starting to actually.
And I think it actually started with the WEF, that was the World Economic Forum. Then they worked in conjunction with the UN to set this law and then start bringing it into countries. They set up the framework in other countries, but they haven't set the precedent in anywhere but Canada. They're trying to lay this groundwork and this legal legislation they can kind of springboard off of to quickly do this, but they need it to work in Canada first. So if somehow this gets shut down in Canada, but right now it just seems to be snowballing and getting bigger and bigger, and they're really just waiting on the Supreme Court to make the ruling. And if they make the ruling in favor of these tribes, it becomes law across Canada. And I think you're going to see land be stripped in vast swaths of Canada from private citizens that thought they owned the land. And then you're going to see that branch out into all these other countries that have already set the framework up.
And again, this is being done through the framework of all reparations for the indigenous nations that we have harmed. And that's egregious enough, but it is actually a stripping of private property from private individuals and citizens.
No, it's not being brought up
it's
not being brought up in under reparations. It's being brought in through the UN saying the government never actually owned the land. So there's no reparations needed, but you have to give the land back.
But it's a framework of we owe XYZ to XYZ other minority group. But deep down, it's a way to strip private property and eventually rights from private citizens.
Yeah, you need to go forward as a collective in these countries, whether it's Mexico, America, Canada, or anywhere else. They try to divide you into these very specific groups and play one group off of another. And that's exactly what they're doing here.
And TN3... 4J4V says, if you don't want to live in civilization, live in a tribe. Nothing wrong with that either. Well, it seems like they're trying to make all of civilization into tribes by handing over the land and just saying you don't actually own your home. You will own nothing and you will be happy because we tell you have to be happy.
There's actually another layer to this where I don't go very much into it because it's very complex, but the UN set this up, came in with the provinces and the government cooperating with them to bring these laws in, thinking they were going to give vast swaths of this land to these tribes, and then the tribe would then circularize the scheme back to the UN by giving them the rights to the natural resources on the land in this global kind of scheme. I don't go into it much right now, but I'm kind of waiting for the next dime
to drop.
Yeah, dime to drop in Canada, where if they actually nationalize this across the whole nation, this becomes law. You're going to see the next level of the scheme where the tribes themselves work with the UN to kind of
manage the land,
tokenize everything on the land and all the natural resources within Canada. Then they want to take that model and place it in all these other countries.
Well, because the UN has to come in and help the poor little indigenous people manage their own land because they don't know how to, and they're doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. I'm sure that's going to be part of the framework, at least, and making sure that climate change initiatives are implemented throughout this land that is now being given back to the people that really care for the land, even though they fill it with trash.
Yeah.
We had a story about that not too long ago. But all this introduction just for this post from Table Salt. BC legislature descends into absolute chaos as MP Armstrong reveals the US-based tribes are now placing land claims in BC as well. You voted UNDRIP into law. This act of betrayal is selling BC for $0.
And UNDRIP is the law that was proposed by the UN and then verified by the British Columbian government. This was that entire legislative scheme that kind of was brought in.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Premier and the Leader of the official opposition voted UNDRIP into law in this province in 2019.
Pause it. They tried to cover this entire thing up, that the government was actually working in collusion with the UN, and it looks like maybe in collusion with these tribes themselves. Out, but the person that brought this in was David Eby within BC, and now he tried to deny that he actually brought it in, but the paperwork was kind of brought up.
This act of betrayal didn't just surrender the province to the 204 Indigenous tribes in BC, but now American tribes want to take in on the action too. Yesterday, news broke that a tribe from Alaska is in court demanding land rights over a gold mine in Northwest BC. Can you blame them, Mr. Speaker? BC is up for sale, and the asking price is $0. My question for the Premier is whether there is any Indigenous tribe that he won't give our province away to.
Mr. Premier.
Honourable Speaker, first of all, and the member knows this.
And that is David Eby. He's the Premier of British Columbia in Canada.
And he must be filling his pockets to the hilt in collusion with these tribes, because a lot of the statements we have showed on this previous, you have to go through the tribes to do anything within BC now. If you want to build a pipeline, if you want to mine, if you want to do anything, the natives get a cut. He gets a cut. The government gets a cut. It's except the private citizens. They get everything taken from them.
We have aggressively resisted the attempts by American tribes to establish claims here in British Columbia. We will continue to do so. We will continue to do so. And the member is completely wrong when she thinks about reconciliation as a cost. The member.
But again, they are talking about reconciliation, another word for essentially reparations that they use in Canada, but
wants to rip that up for her ideology, which is clearly anti-Indigenous, unambiguously racist. And it is incredibly problematic that we have these voices in our legislature tearing at the fabric of the agreements that we need to be prosperous and successful in this province. Those tens of thousands of jobs are not up for grabs as long as we're on this side of the House. We're going to fight for those jobs. We're going to deliver prosperity for British Columbians. We're going to do it in partnership with First Nations and those members on the House on that side of the House.
And this guy is just about as woke as you get, so much to an extreme. He's legislating wokeness into law. And this is the problem with Canada. This is why we left. I don't trust the Canadian people to vote against this. They will vote against their own interest and become serfs. Canada will become not only a socialist nation, but a communist nation if they continue down this path.
And because, again, for the past 20, 30 years, the words racist, anti-Indigenous have been thrown out as a way to silence anybody that has any disagreement on it. And unfortunately, Canadians have been conditioned enough to actually be scared of that and be scared of being called that. So they'll just continue down the path to,
well, many young Canadians think they'll never own a home, and they're right, because the job market does not look good. Even if you do have a job, the house prices have been so inflated. If you think house prices in other nations are high, Canada has some of the highest housing prices. One-bedroom apartments can go upwards of $1 million. Mm-hmm. It is absolutely insane. So why wouldn't they vote for socialism? They want to see the entire system burn at this point.
And they want the government to help them. But also with the investment of...
They want the government to help them, but the government's doing nothing but lining their own pockets and working against their own citizens' interests.
But they don't see that. Again, talking about the insanity of Mark Carney and how he just, throws money at everybody else except the Canadian people. From Antonio tweets, so now Carney gave $500 million to the European Space Agency to create jobs.
So he's investing $1 trillion in the US, $2 trillion in the UAE. He's giving hundreds of millions of dollars for all these causes all around the world. This is just another one. This benefits all the other countries except for Canada. None of this is being reciprocated. Mark Carney was just following Donald Trump around the world, like you kind of said, and he didn't come back with any agreements or anything that was even a little beneficial for Canada.
Television. Well, a prime minister who describes himself as a European is giving $500 million to the European Space Agency to create good jobs in Europe. And it gets worse because the Harwell Science and Innovation Campus, where the European Space Agency will be is located in the UK, is 50% owned by Brookfield.
Brookfield Asset Management is the company that Mark Carney used to essentially own. He was the head of it, and he quietly moved it to the US before he was elected prime minister through the votes, not beforehand, and doesn't really want to talk about it. However, all the investments that Brookfield does go all over the world, elsewhere except to Canada.
And if a natural resource project is approved by Mark Carney in Canada, which is very, very rare, you best believe it's going to line Brookfield Asset Management's pockets.
Mm-hmm. Rather than focusing on lining the pockets of Brookfield and not ripping off Canadian workers, why don't they invest in Canada?
Fortunately, the other side doesn't recognize the key role that space investments play in our country and our national innovation, especially in a critical year for Space for Canada. We're sending not one, but two astronauts into space. This is an incredibly exciting time for Canada and Canadians to be inspired by the potential of space and space in our economy. And I hope the other side reconsiders their opposition to it.
Incredibly exciting time if you're a shareholder in Brookfield right now. Let me tell you, with all the slimy contracts that these guys are giving to companies affiliated with Brookfield. Meanwhile, we have 2.2 million Canadians lining up at food banks. Meanwhile, we have a 6.9% unemployment rate. And what do they decide to do? Invest $500 million to give jobs to Europe. How is the priority of this government to give jobs to Europeans when there's a 6.9% unemployment in Canada and 2.2 million people using a food bank? Justify that.
You know, when it comes to the most innovative things that we can do as a country, we often do them together and with other countries. So, for instance, a former member of this House, a former minister in this former government, the Honourable late Mark Garneau, he went on an American spacecraft, and there was a key piece of Canadian technology that was deployed as part of that, the Canadarm, a piece of technology on which we should all be proud on both sides of this House. So as we continue to cooperate with our European partners on this, let's see the bigger picture and see how the benefits can...
And it is funny how they try to justify the money laundering machine that is Mark Carney.
And Mark Carney is just strengthening his relationship with Europe, with the UK. These are a dying nation that are headed towards war. We're going to get into that in a little bit. But if they go to war, Canada is going to go to war because he's part of NATO and he's part of that European alliance. I think the United States may just break the NATO contract at some point because it's no longer serving their interests. Canada has no reason to go to war. They have two oceans kind of protecting them. They should keep it that way. Instead, he wants to play buddy-buddy with Europe and press this Ukraine war into something more than it needs to be.
And it is absolutely ridiculous, again, how they try to justify and speak about the stupidity of the Liberals and of Mark Carney. And we saw it also during Mark Carney's speech where he was he was gaslighting the Canadian youth by saying, oh, you'll have all these opportunities and you should be grateful to live in Canada, even though, again, most people have to line up for food banks at this point or will have to in the near future. Nobody can afford a house, much less young people. And even with the older citizens, they're getting crushed and their pension funds are being used as essentially lottery tickets to see what happens with the money.
Well, he should be investing or putting these things, this $500 million for this European Space Agency, up as a benefit of doing business with Canada for the Americans. A huge tariff deal, which will determine the future of Canada, is currently on the table. All these little contracts and all these hundreds of millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars or $2 trillion going to the UAE needs to be put on the table for the Americans to get a sweetheart of a tariff deal.
And again, I mentioned Canadians cannot afford houses. There's a giant housing crisis, not only in British Columbia and Vancouver, where we came from, and we saw it firsthand, but all across Canada. And however, the Liberal government decides now to build housing for international students. And as a former international student myself, I can say that this is retarded.
And they don't pay taxes. And this is $1 billion. Mm-hmm. Again,
so the government of BC is using $1 billion of taxpayer money to build housing for international students who've never paid any tax in Canada. Also, two of the 1BC MLAs did pretty well, but they continue to respond with government. Well, that too, but with diversity is our strength.
Again, some way you can get American contractors to come up and put this on the table for the tariff deal. The entire future of Canada relies on that tariff deal. The fact that they're investing $1 billion for foreign students and foreign students don't pay taxes, this is a lose-lose for everybody.
And most foreign students have enough money to pay the exorbitant international student fee, so they can, find housing for themselves.
Well, and one more thing. Oh, God.
Except for the ones that get duped in there and have to end up living in a 20-person household. But in that case, go after the schools with the diploma mills that are tricking them into going to Canada, but then starving because it's not what they thought it was going to be, and they end up with no diploma.
Most Canadian foreign students come to Canada, either get their degree or transfer in the final years of their degree to an American school. And then once they are fully kind of certified and they got their diploma, they always try to immigrate to the United States because they realize there is no future in Canada. They can see that because they've been in Canada for those 2 or 4 years while they were getting that degree.
Mm-hmm.
That the government has a foreign welfare program where they take money from citizens and give it to non-tax-paying guests. The BC government is spending $2 billion on university student housing, but half of this money, nearly $1 billion, is given away to foreign student housing, students who don't even call Canada home. This government is prioritizing and spending money on guests instead of our own citizens. Will the minister act immediately to cut this $1 billion foreign student subsidy and give this money back to British Columbians?
Okay, that's pretty good.
I wouldn't have
Minister of
to
Post-Secondary Education.
What is this person speaking over there?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy to rise for my first time in this House to answer question and question period. It's unfortunate. But it's unfortunate that the question has to be riddled in such rhetoric about the diversity of our province and of our post-secondary institutions that truly makes our province so great. On this side of the House, we know that the diversity of our post-secondary sector is what truly contributes to the growth, the innovation, and what is going to lead BC to being the engine of Canada.
Yes, because all the actual Canadian students are leaving because they see no opportunity in Canada, and then the poor international students that get duped into going, number one, can probably pay their own way and pay for their own housing, but at the same time, end up duped too and end up leaving as well.
I'm going to use this as an opportunity to bring up another subject, and that's what's going on kind of with the U.S. and Israel. A lot of American First people are saying, pull the money away from Israel. Don't keep having this foreign investment. I think it's not going to stop with Israel. Even if they do pull the funding from Israel, this American First thing, what is it based upon? Stop sending money to foreign countries, not just Israel. It's going to be Egypt next, and then Jordan, and then this program and that program. A lot of the citizens in these countries want to stop sending money outside of the country and start investing in the future of your own country with your own citizens. Mm-hmm. That's the basis of this whole thing. And this is just another wrinkle of that. Yeah, it might be an American First thing that's being put forward by American politicians, but it's really happening in every country. These citizens want their government to stop putting their citizens first, and the governments are just absolutely refusing to do it. They love to send this money overseas, so it can't be tracked. So the money comes back right into the politicians' pockets. It's a completely corrupt system, and we have an article coming up in a little bit about how especially young people would rather have AI running the government than politicians. And what are you going to really say? There's still going to be corruption in AI because the people that are writing those programs are going to build in corruption, and the system is going to become corrupt that way as well. But people have absolutely lost confidence in their governments, whether it's Canada, the EU, the
Mexico.
UK, everywhere.
Here we never had it in Mexico, but Psychic says this is embarrassing, vergüenza ajena, or secondhand embarrassment. Yes, Canada in general is secondhand embarrassment, and
they want to
just
keep
an embarrassment in general.
And they want to say racist, or start calling names. But it's the model that needs to happen in Mexico, the United States, the EU, all around the world. The government or whoever's governing that country needs to put their citizens first, stop investing in things that aren't going to benefit the country and the citizens.
And with this laundry machine, like this money laundering system that they're all involved in, sending money to each other and investments and this and that and for aid for this and that, which just ends up going eventually back either into the country or into another country that they want to, actually help. From TN3J4B, I can't read numbers and letters, says mud huts are super cheap. In Canada, you'd freeze to death, which a lot of people are doing, but Also, let's see another investment that the Canadian government is doing, because Canada just committed $1 billion for diseases in other countries at the G20 in South Africa.
Again, they're sending this money overseas because it stops getting tracked as soon as it leaves the country, and then it comes back right into the politicians' pockets. This was happening with USAID in the United States. It's happening in Europe. You're seeing them just pass money around in this big circle, lining every politician's pocket.
And with this also, it's again using health to also control the citizens and also control people in other countries. But Canada announces $1 billion for global fund to find infectious diseases. What infectious diseases? What are they doing? Jibby jabs again? Are they
invested in your own country? If they want to invest it in this and they want a virtual signal off it, make sure it stays in the country and it's disclosed how every single dollar is spent.
But it is interesting how they're trying to frame it over on like the woke side of Canadian media. From Vancouver is Awesome, they say Canada cuts back spending on fighting infectious diseases at the G20 in South Africa. Prime Minister Mark Carney has made Canada's first ever cut to funding for a major program for fighting it. But again, why is it still there? Why are they still funding it to the tune of $1 billion? Still, imagine how much more it was before. In the world's poorest countries, a move that has been sharply criticized by Canada's development sector.
We want to invest in space agencies, jibby jabs overseas, anything overseas, but actually investing in Canada, no.
And again,
we want to give the whole pension fund to another country, the UAE, another $1 trillion to the United States. What happened about elbows up, putting Canada first? That was the model he ran on, and it seems like he's putting everybody else before Canada.
And again, the $1 billion is down more than 17% from what was being contributed back in 2022. So that is where taxpayers' money and government money that could be used for something within Canada is being used for.
Well, and yeah, okay, I'll just kind of leave it there. There is a rumor going around why he's spending the Canadian pension plan overseas and everywhere else except for Canada. He wants to make it so the pension fund can't be invested anywhere else, and it will have to be invested in Canada in this social kind of government. But he wants the people to demand it. So it's going to be a lose-lose. I think he's playing 4D chess here with the Canadian people. He wants to invest his own money and Brookfield asset money outside the country, but eventually they're trying to pass legislation so it only invested in Canada. And although that would be a good thing, the problem with that is there is no private industry coming into Canada. So you're going to invest money in Canada, but you're going to get no return on it. So you're going to see that pension money kind of disappear. What he needs to do is get private investment first into Canada and then follow that up and see where the holes are and then invest the pension fund in Canada and strengthen Canada as a whole. If you only invest the pension fund, it's not going to work if you don't get private investment first.
And TN3 says sometimes you got to leave your nice expensive things behind if you want a future. Shouldn't have to be that way, but I mean, in Canada, young people don't even have nice, expensive things to even give away. That's the main issue. But there is one shining, bright spot in Canada that is Alberta and Premier Danielle Smith. Hopefully, they can become part of the U.S. and that continues to go through. But in this clip, she destroys DEI ideology on live TV, and she continues to be based, not always, but most of the time.
She's the most competent leader in Canada. Her close behind her would be Pierre Poilievre, and then what's the leader of the PPC?
Maxime Bernier.
Maxime Bernier, but Maxime Bernier doesn't have any real political power. No. But right now she's kind of holding all the cards, but she has to threaten that Alberta will leave Canada in order for Canada to even take Alberta seriously. Canada has been stepping on Alberta like a doormat for the last 20 years.
And investing all the money that Alberta brings in elsewhere around Canada, except for Alberta.
And now they're trying to give them a single pipeline and saying, shut up, keep sending your money to Ottawa. Mm-hmm. It's time for Alberta to separate from Canada.
Let's be frank, DEI is a very highly charged...
And DEI is diversity, equity, inclusion, in case you didn't know or forgot.
Ideological doctrine that teaches a particular perspective about colonialism and white settlement. And you have to ask the question, what are we trying to get to with that? Are we trying to get to a point where we have fairness in hiring and a diversity of people who are hired into positions? Or are we trying to socially engineer some kind of narrative? So I think that it's pretty clear that there's a difference between those two things. And we certainly support merit-based hiring and making sure that we're removing any barriers. let's be frank.
And it shouldn't be, headline news that Danielle Smith is saying that she wants to support merit-based hiring, but that is the point at which they're at. And I continue to warn not just Mexico, but a lot of other Latin American countries that were or think they were colonized and have continued with this narrative, that all of these things we see implemented in places like Canada, Australia, with the colonization talk, that is indigenism, that is coming very soon, and it has started to be implemented with the very left woke governments as well, like Claudia Sheinbaum and Morena have tried to do and continue with that narrative. We just saw her yesterday or 2 days ago, Claudia Sheinbaum, Mexico's president, say that the U.S. stole land from Mexico, which is not true. Mexico had to sell it to settle our debt.
Yeah, this whole scheme with the natives taking the land from the government or the government giving it back is worth trillions and trillions of dollars. Politicians are lining their pockets. The UN is lining their pockets. These native tribes are lining their pockets. It's become an industry, and it's at the cost of the citizens of the country. Mm-hmm. So if this is happening in your country, or you think it might be, speak up, stand up, and do not give land acknowledgements.
And in the EU, which is mostly dominated by this idiocy and by globalism, Poland continues to defy the EU in some good ways.
We're going to get into international news now.
Sorry.
That was the end of the Canadian segment.
We should have like a ticker or something. I mean, I'll try to design something to make it more
Sometimes
obvious.
There's just not enough stories for a regional news. Today it just happened to be there was a lot of Canadian news, but now everything else is international.
Yes. I also got to change our borders because mine is yours and yours is mine.
Well, I think we need to change the entire background.
Yeah, we're gonna freshen up how everything looks on the channel. But from Marinawa, Poland defies the EU. No to migrant quotas, no to fines. Warsaw is tightening its immigration policy and outright rejecting the EU's migration pact, with Donald Tusk, Polish PM, saying, "We will not accept relocations, we will not pay the fines." With nearly 1 million Ukrainian refugees already in the country and rising tension along its eastern border, the government says it's at a breaking point, while the EU threatens legal action, because of course Poland is expanding border controls, keeping asylum rights suspended at the Belarus border, and demanding a full exemption from the pact. Public opinion is shifting fast. 63% of Poles want aid limited only to Ukrainians from the active war zones, not everybody.
This is absolutely massive. What was happening before this, the only country really stepping up to the plate was Hungary, and they were actually paying $1 million a day in order to not take immigrants. Poland is now saying, we're not going to even pay your fines, EU. You can screw off. This is going to embolden Hungary to do the same. I was watching an interview with the Hungarian president, Viktor Orban, and what he was saying, it's cheaper overall to pay the $1 million fine per day because the consequence is absolutely social collapse. It takes the jobs, it takes the social welfare benefits that are needed by the citizens themselves, and it could collapse the country. It also builds unrest. So the fact that Poland is now stepping up to the plate saying we're not going to pay the fines, this is putting huge cracks in not only NATO, the EU, but it's really going to create an alliance through the Eastern European countries like Hungary, like Poland. And they absolutely need Poland because this entire Ukraine war front is actually being waged in Poland. All the military equipment, all the soldiers are stored in Poland before they come over to Ukraine. All the refugees are stored in Poland. So Poland actually has more power over the EU for once than the EU has over Poland. So if they tell Poland, no, you're going to have to pay the fine, Poland's going to say, get your shit out of our country.
And we have watched quite a few figures that used to be all climate change, kind of back off and back away from that. And now we're seeing also Germany backing off the climate fantasy from Marinawa. Germany backs off of climate fantasy as industry collapses and the AfD surges. And we continue to see a lot of right-wing parties, not only in Europe, but all over the world, start to continue to gain traction, even though the AfD was censored and debanked by Germany.
And we're gonna read this post, but it's too little too late. I think he says that in this post, and that is the absolute truth. They disassembled their nuclear power plants, shut them down in order to get wind and solar. Wind and solar doesn't work in Germany. It's a cloudy country. This was absolutely ridiculous. Now there's this massive AI surge coming, which they need energy. They already shut down their plants. Other EU countries followed in the wake of that. Now they're opening coal plants because they have no other short-term strategy other than to quickly open coal plants so they can get electricity to their country. They have Russia sitting right there. If they would just negotiate peace, they could get cheap energy and re-industrialize their countries.
After years of preaching green dogma, Berlin is now slamming the brakes on its energy transition. Too little, too late for a country deep in recession, with its industrial backbone cracking under sky-high energy prices. Chancellor Merz now says no climate policy that threatens living standards will be accepted, which is translation. Germany is done committing economic unaliving to impress Brussels. The Greens are melting down. The factories are begging for combustion engines, and Spain's Sanchez is about to be left alone carrying the EU's climate torch and the bill. And again, Spain is one of those countries that continues to be far, far left and insane, but there continues to be the rise of the right wing in many of these countries.
And this is absolutely massive. This is one of the big pillars. They wanted to have carbon credits on, so you could buy and sell carbon credits for individuals, and all that was going to be based off a digital ID system. The fact that this pillar has been knocked down is huge. Now we need to keep fighting against digital IDs. And the next thing they're going to try to do is bring jibby jabs in, and they want to track people with these digital IDs, whether they have jibby jabs, and they want to take their climate money and invest it in healthcare, the jibby jab industry specifically. We talked about this. That's their transition. So they really need to fight that next pillar that's quickly coming up. They talked about this at COP30, which was the big climate summit, how they want to transition away from climate because the narrative is breaking down, and they want to have mandated healthcare.
And Bill Gates' shift was towards more jibby jabs and more that side of things.
And industrial farming is another big pillar. They want to get rid of small farmers. They want to get rid of cattle farmers, things of this nature. They want it to be completely controlled by the government because they want to go down this socialist path. It's very dangerous. Where you see the government get involved in business in this fascistic way. And then on top of that, you have a digital ID and a digital currency they're currently trying to push. If you go into socialism at this point, it's so dangerous because you may never get out. They're going to go from socialism to communism, and they actually have the tools to do it this time.
Techno-communism, which would be, or digital communism, which would be even worse. And with the farmers, for example, it's not just in places like Canada and Australia, but for years in the Nordic countries, Eva Vlardingerbrock, who is a content creator, a political commentator, and journalist, has been talking about it and speaking about it since they came up with these insane ideas. And I do have some videos from all the way back then in our Spanish channel, which used to be our English channel. It was our original channel, speaking about this years ago. And again, speaking about the debanking of unpopular or the opposition to current governments, not only in Europe, but in Canada as well. So a lot of the tactics and techniques that a lot of these governments that want to continue to expand and to expand their own control over their own citizens, they borrow from each other. One architect of these insane policies himself was Mark Carney, all the way back when he was working at the Bank of England, but he has continued, and I think he never thought that when Justin Trudeau stepped down, when he realized the people were going to go after him for sure, he didn't realize that he was going to have to come to the forefront, because people like Mark Carney, who are now having to step into the role of actually governing, have been in the background planning and getting all of this together. And now they're trying to enact it themselves because nobody else will.
Yeah, he was a banker, and they are running out of puppets. The people that are actually pulling the strings are having to be forced to the front, like Mark Carney. And this thing is falling apart in a spectacular fashion. Mark Carney specifically was less on the healthcare side, and he was all in on these carbon credits, the social credit score, the digital currency on that side, because he came from the banking side. And that was supposed to be the future of the socialist society that they're trying to really build within Canada and the EU. Donald Trump is throwing a huge monkey wrench in this. As much as I've been talking a little bit of crap on the Epstein files and some of the missteps from Trump, he has still held back a lot of the socialism, communist ideals that they really want to bring in and mass form through digital ID and digital currency.
And as we continue to say, one of the last remaining efforts that they have to continue with this and continue with the implementation of a digital currency, digital ID, at least within Europe, but worldwide too, is the Ukraine-Russia war. And we just saw Ukraine Ukraine's representative at the United Nations rejecting the Trump peace plan. This is from Wall Street Mav.
We got a few articles about this. I've been covering it the last few days. America is really putting a lot of pressure on Ukraine because Russia was willing to compromise a lot, and they thought they had a deal both sides were going to go with. The EU put massive pressure on Ukraine not to take this deal. Also, the EU leadership knows where the bodies are buried, knows where the money is stored. A lot of it that's stored in European banks. So if Zelensky takes this deal, they are going to out him and hang him. So it looks like there's probably not going to be an end to this thing, but this does set up the opportunity for the U.S. to pull further away, make the EU engage more financially in this. And that might be a good thing because it's bleeding the EU dry. The EU seems to want a world war or a broader war with Russia. That being said, if they don't have the money to do it and America is not willing to step in on their behalf, they're not going to be able to start that broader war. Hopefully. But Trump's only in there for 3 years, so maybe they're going to outweight him.
Has officially received from the American side a draft plan. We outlined the fundamental principles that matter to our people. We agreed to work on the plan's provisions in a way that would bring about a just end of the war. In this context, allow me to make several critical points. First, while Ukraine stands ready to engage in meaningful negotiations to end this war, including at the leaders' level, our red lines are clear and unwavering. There will never be any recognition, formal or otherwise, of Ukrainian territory temporarily occupied by the Russian Federation as Russian. Our land is not for sale. Ukraine will not accept any limits on its right to self-defense or on the size and capabilities of our armed forces. Nor will we tolerate any infringement on our sovereignty, including our sovereign right to choose the alliances we want to join. Any genuine peace process must respect a fundamental principle: nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, and nothing about Europe without Europe. And let me be equally clear, we will not reward the genocidal intent that underpins Russian aggression by undermining our identity.
Okay, we can kind of stop it there. This was just a broad rejection by the EU and Zelensky of this deal. Before it was even put up there, they came out with press statements saying they're rejecting it. Now that it was on the table, they came back out and said they rejected it. The reason this was being Donald Trump was really trying to force it is he was being lied to by his intelligence. They were telling him Ukraine was winning the war, Ukraine is not losing land. It has become extremely obvious, even to an idiot, that Ukraine is losing the war right now. They're on their last major line of defense, and the fact that Trump went to Russia and Russia was willing to actually bend on a lot of the things that they want. Trump thought he would force it in, and the Ukraine and the EU just aren't having it. A lot of their plans are absolutely reliant on this Russian war. Their entire future, they had banked on this Russian war. And that's why they had constantly moved NATO further and further to the east.
And I think that is an important point that a lot of people that still follow or talk about the war, which are less and less each time because there's more pressing issues, don't realize is that this goes way further than just Russia or Russia having more power or Ukraine itself, but it is the last bastion that the EU has to, once again, overreach within their power and their control.
And as far as the war goes specifically, they've already lost the majority of this land. Russia's only asking for a few extra cities here, which would be the last line of defense. And that would actually save the rest of Ukraine. If they continue with this thing, Russia happens to be in a power position right now. There's no way to really stop them, especially with the U.S. not wanting to invest anything else in this war. Now's the time to save your country. You have to swallow the pill. You're going to have to give up a little bit in order to not only save the rest of your land, but hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Ukrainians that really don't want to fight in this war anymore.
But again, a lot of EU countries themselves are in trouble, but they continue to try to push this from Marinov. Well, Germany, France, and the UK, all of which are in pretty deep trouble themselves, reject peace deal push, back Zelensky's terms. Zelensky held the line on Ukraine's sovereignty, and his top European allies backed him. Germany's Friedrich Merz, France's Emmanuel Macron, and UK PM Keir Starmer agreed peace talks must start at the current battle lines, not on Russia's terms. They also insisted Ukraine must stay armed and ready to defend itself, and again, money laundering machine.
And from a elite perspective or a governor's view, a governing elite's view, the war gives them everything they want. They can send the people in their society that vote against these globalist policies to war so they don't have to deal with them anymore. Number one, they're going to die in that war. So it's going to be very hard to vote against globalist policies at that point. Number two, they can line their pockets with money, like you just said. They can bring in a digital ID and a digital currency. In a lot of these constitutions in these countries and the EU, they're able to push things forward that they wouldn't be able to push forward in a time of peace. So they want this more than anything. Also, if they can get the U.S. to back them, they actually think they'll take Russia and take 100 years of wealth away from Russia, put it in their pockets, and refloat the European economy.
But Trump has given an ultimatum to Zelensky to accept the New Deal, according to Reuters, and if he refuses, U.S. intelligence, weapons, and support will be stopped. He has threatened with this before.
And he every time he threatens this, he still sends money in support, but less, and he makes the European take more. The European Union take more responsibility, invest their money, invest everything, which really keeps the war at bay because he's bleeding the Europeans dry. Eventually, they're going to have nothing left because they wanted to fight this silly war, and they'll probably be divided up between Russia, China, and the United States.
They already almost have nothing left. That is the thing. We have reported that both France and the UK have tried to be rescued by the World Bank, who doesn't have enough money to rescue one, let alone both of them. So this is their money-making kind of laundering money machine. The only way they're
planning to steal almost $500 billion from the Russians that has been frozen in European banks. If they do that, nobody on an international level, from the Chinese to the Australians to the Americans, will no longer keep their money in European banks because they just can't trust their money won't be frozen and then taken from them. They'll undermine the legitimacy of their own banking system. And when you're trying to bring in a digital currency that was really supposed to be the global digital currency, the last thing you want to do is undermine your banking system. But it seems to be the way they think they're going to fund this military and this fight.
But Putin seems to continue to want to move forward, at least from Mariupol.
Okay, 1 second. Okay. This is a long post. I'm going to get you to read it all here. Russia is actually bending over backwards because they almost have the territory they need. They do want an off-ramp. If they conquer all of Ukraine, it becomes an Afghanistan situation where it becomes a never-ending war. They're willing to give quite a bit at this point. They were willing to give a lot in Alaska. I think they renegotiated the deal from Alaska, and they're willing to give even more at this point. Ukraine and the EU are outright rejecting this. Trump was very hyped on this deal because he's like, wow, the Russians are actually giving a lot for the not only in Alaska, but they renegotiated, and the Russians were willing to compromise on that as well. At this point, Russia's given as much as they're going to give. They're not going to give any more, especially when they're in such a dominant military position. If they make it past this last line of defense, there's nothing else stopping them for the rest of Ukraine.
Yes, so Putin, the 28-point Trump plan is now on the table for ending the war. So at least one side is open to talking. It's no secret that President Trump's peace plan to resolve the situation in Ukraine was discussed before our Alaska meeting. During that prior discussion, the American side asked us to make certain concessions to show what they called flexibility. The main goal of our meeting in Alaska, this was a few months ago, was to confirm during the talks in Anchorage that despite certain issues and complications on our part, we agreed to those suggestions and are ready to show the flexibility we were asked for. We informed all of our partners and friends in the Global South in detail, including China, India, South Africa, Brazil, and the CSTO countries. Of course, all our friends and partners supported and upheld those terms. As we see, after our talks in Alaska, a certain pause was taken. We know this was due to Ukraine's actual refusal of President Trump's peace settlement plan. I believe this was the reason for its new iteration, the 28-point plan. We have this plan. We received it through our channels cooperation, and I believe it may serve as a foundation for a final peace settlement. And it was translated because he's speaking in Russian. So
yeah, and the Ukrainians and the EU are just outright rejecting this, hoping they can wait Trump out. They think they can steal this Russian money that's the tune of almost $500 billion to continue this war until Trump is out of office. That being said, Trump wants to disengage from this war. Why? Because he's trying to use pressure politics on a lot of other countries like Venezuela. He's surrounding Venezuela right now. We're going to get into those stories in just a minute, but he wants Maduro to step down without having to actually fire a missile. The other thing he's doing is he's putting a ton of pressure on China through their allies. We're going to get into multiple stories about that, how they're blowing up Chinese shipping vessels. But they need military might in order to kind of avoid war. They have to put pressure on China. They have to put pressure on Venezuela. If they're engaged in this Ukraine war, they just don't have the military equipment. So when they're making these threats, a lot of these countries know they're not going to actually be able to expand into a full-fledged conflict, which makes the threats hollow.
And from Sputnik, also during this talks, Putin says if Ukraine does not want to discuss Trump's proposals, then Europeans should understand that events like Kupiansk will be repeated.
Major Ukrainian cities have been falling in mass over the last few weeks. It's going to continue to happen. This is really the last, maybe not the last, but we're getting close to the last off-ramp for the Ukrainians, and they are just saying, no way, no how, we're not negotiating anything. Okay, and let's go into the next story if we can.
So yes, now we're coming over to the American poll, at least. Oh, let me answer some of the comments. Rafa says, did you see that Trump's chief of staff, Susie Wiles, worked in Netanyahu's campaign?
Yes.
She was sent there by Trump.
Susie Wiles was the one person in the administration I pointed out more than any. She is the one sabotaging the Trump administration, turning that administration from America first into a corporatist regime. Her and Marco Rubio, but she's the one really placing these power players to block out RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, and the rest. She is the cancer within that administration. And yeah, I know her former connections, along with a lot of other former connections, some staffers within the Trump administration have, like one of his big financial advisors used to be the financial advisor to George Soros, and that was his big resume.
But with Susie Wiles and 3 other staffers, I believe, Trump actually sent them to help during Netanyahu's latest campaign because they had the knowledge from the 2016 Trump campaign.
Yeah.
And Rafa asks on RUMBLE if we're still reading the YouTube comments. Yes, sorry, we just went into a whole thing on the Ukraine stuff, but yes, we're still, and we read every single comment. So if you're watching and you want to contribute something, ask something, give your opinion, we're more than welcome, and it doesn't have to be in a super chat because we're not monetized.
You do have to become a subscriber for I think 5 or 10 minutes before we allow chats, just because we don't want a bunch of spam or bad comments in there.
But let's move over to Venezuela. So from Marinafwal, Russian oil tanker retreats after U.S. Navy intercept off of Venezuela. A sanctioned Russian tanker carrying fuel to Venezuela suddenly reversed course when a U.S. Navy warship crossed its path near the Venezuelan coast. The vessel now sits idle offshore, suggesting Washington might be escalating from paper sanctions to naval enforcement. The tanker was part of Moscow's energy lifeline, keeping Maduro's regime afloat despite Western pressure. Its retreat marks a potential shift in U.S. strategy from watching sanctioned ships to actively blocking them. Russian oil has been Venezuela's economic oxygen as both nations coordinate to dodge sanctions because Maduro completely gave away all of their resources. If the Navy starts intercepting deliveries, Putin loses a client and Maduro loses his fuel. The message to Moscow and Caracas, your oil for survival scheme now requires running a U.S. Navy gauntlet.
Yeah, and we have a couple articles on Venezuela. It looks like this could be the beginning of a naval blockade. There is also an air blockade. At least that's what the next story is going to kind of show us. That being said, the only way to get things in and out of that country is going to be by land. I think they're surrounded by Colombia and a few other, Brazil. They're not going to be able to get those resources out of there. This is putting a ton of pressure on Maduro. We know the CIA assets are currently within the country. There was also a oil refinery that was blown up the other day. A lot of people suspect that was the U.S. There is a ton of pressure currently being put on Maduro. I think they're going to continue to escalate this with these blockades and financially try to break his back so he steps down. We know they're in talks with Maduro for him to step down, possibly go to Russia or Cuba. I think Russia would be the safer bet. He can take a lot of his money with him. It will allow the U.S. to kind of point at this compromise if they try to do this to another country in the future. They can say, look how we treated Maduro. You need to negotiate with us.
And yes, from Jackson Hinkle, the U.S. has just warned that all of Venezuela's airspace is closed for military activity. And we have here the actual issuing. U.S. issues security NOTAM for Venezuelan airspace. On Friday, November 21st, the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration issued a security NOTAM cautioning civil aircraft operators about potential dangers in Venezuelan airspace. The FAA says the NOTAM is a result of increased GNSS interference in Venezuelan airspace and military drills beginning in September. U.S. operators now must provide 72 hours prior notice to the FAA before flying through Venezuela.
This also allows them to clear out all the airspace. So if they do decide to strike, it's going to be very clear it's only military assets in the sky. So I would say the naval blockade puts a lot of financial pressure on Maduro. The air blockade really says, we're ready to strike. We're putting a lot of pressure on you militarily.
And we did see the U.S. blowing up Venezuelan ships, and a lot of the Democrats crying and saying, that is not good. This goes against human rights. But there's other countries around the world that are doing the same.
Well, we've talked about this, I think, on the last 2 days about Venezuela. A lot of money goes into Venezuela to launder that money for the Democratic Party, and then it's flown back into the United States and laundered around for campaigns. So going after Venezuela could really help Trump in the midterms, not just because if he can get Maduro to step down without an actual conflict, that's huge, but because it stops the dirty money coming to the DNC or the Democratic Party. It's one of the big countries where they really launder money through.
Yes, but I was actually trying to segue with the Venezuelan ships because Indonesia is now also destroying Chinese vessels for illegally fishing in Indonesian waters from Nguyen Thi Hong. Seriously, what's stopping the world from trying this?
And I'll get you to read this whole thing, but this is also huge. This isn't the U.S. doing it directly, but they're getting their allies to finally put guardrails on China. I don't know why they didn't do this a whole lot earlier. China sends vessels all around the world, and right off the coast of Chile, it's famously known for putting drag nets all along the seabed, absolutely destroying fishing for locals. They do this all over the world. They need to get these Chinese fishing vessels or other vessels in check.
So Indonesia destroyed Chinese vessels for illegally fishing in Indonesian waters. Yes, we littoral nations have had enough of China's hooliganism. Now China must realize that our actions will be the consequence of their actions. China instigates, does horrible things and attacks us. Can't we just hold Chinese thugs accountable for their grim acts for once?
And this is really sending a warning to China. Stop invading Japan's airspace. Stop invading Taiwan's airspace. Stop navally invading their water space. And finally, these countries are starting to hit back, and it's because they have a lot of backup from the United States. If you can kind of put China in check here, it can really stop a wider war, and that's kind of what I want to see. They have been absolutely not respecting other people's territories.
And also South Korea, from Dr. Min Tran, South Korean Coast Guard's water cannon Chinese fishing militia vessels that illegally entered their EEZ. This is exactly what the Chinese goons were doing to us in their own water. I'm guessing speaking of the Asian countries, but they're water boarding, cannoning.
They're starting to defend
fishing vessels.
They're starting to defend their actual borders, and they never did this against China because everybody was scared. When they war game the U.S. against China or the U.S. allies against China and their allies, the U.S. loses every single time, except there was one strategy that worked every single time, and that was cutting off shipping lanes around the world. In order to cut off shipping lanes around the world, they're going to have to get their allies to start defending their own territory and their own waterways, and they have to normalize this behavior. So this is, I think, in the context of a larger strategy. They're going to start cutting off naval, fishing vessels, and shipping vessels. That's the last part of the Chinese economy that's really propping them up, and it's their manufacturing. They ship around the world with the waterways. If they start cutting off the choke points in the waterways, the Chinese economy is really going to be in a serious problem.
Mm-hmm. And now we're moving on because we went kind of to Venezuela for higher up in Latin America to here in Mexico. If you didn't know, I am Mexican and we do live in Mexico. We used to live in Canada, but Claudia Sheinbaum continues her crusade. Claudia Sheinbaum is the president of Mexico, a far-left, insane woman. continuing the project of the far-left insane man that was Andrés Manuel López Obrador. And she continues to both play victim, as the left usually does, and to try to hold the U.S. and Donald Trump off at bay, but at the same time ruining the citizens' lives and livelihoods. And also we saw during the march this past 15th of November, the citizenry uprising against Claudia Sheinbaum's government, but it has been portrayed in the media as a lot more violent than, for example, what we experienced, and with a lot of Antifa or Black Bloc being there, who knows sent by who, to start and instigate fights that we saw. But she's continued to talk and trying to defend Mexico against the invasion from the US. So Sheinbaum says, whoever calls for foreign intervention, she continues to blame the right or the conservatives here in the country, even though Mexico has no actual right, has no actual conservatives.
I don't like Sheinbaum either, but I'm not as hard as you are on her. Yes. I do understand that she is working this tariff negotiation when she blames the far right. I think she wants to point at the United States, but she can't. And her predecessor, AMLO, did put a major industrial project in, which were the 2 ports and the railway. So to say they're crazy woke liberals, yeah, I might not like their ideology, but at least they do some things for the country on a nationalistic level that have benefited. Although I might not like them, I do see that even this color revolution that is happening, it has the U.S. color revolution. It has the U.S.'s fingerprints all over it.
That is true. Or could have the U.S.'s fingerprints. We're still waiting to see what the actual reaction and what the actual consequences are from this march. Again, it's only been a week. There was one yesterday as well, but that was blockaded off by this government that continues to say that they're all for the people and they want the people to be able to demonstrate peacefully, and yet they put in jail a bunch of students that were from Gen Z. That is what the protest was called.
But I will say this.
They continue to be, two-faced, and with what she said here as well.
Well, I will say this. If she doesn't put censorship laws in right now, good on her, because this is a January 6th that she could point at this, and there's already the legislation. She already has the judiciary and the courts to implement censorship laws if she wanted.
And she's already trying to do that.
But if she doesn't do it en masse, I'm going to be a little bit impressed.
However, I can continue to, I plan to make some edited videos kind of explaining how Mexican politics works and how the Mexican political system and the millions of parties that we've had and continue to have always been mostly left or center left, never center right. And explaining Mexican politics in depth. Yes, right now it might seem like Claudia Sheinbaum and AMLO have done some positive things for Mexico, but with the consequence of massive debt and massive lack of opportunities for the rest of the citizens. But again, Sheinbaum continues in her victim woke crusade, and she says, whoever calls for foreign intervention is mistaken. Again, the opposition continues to call for the U.S. to come into Mexico to help solve the organized crime crisis. Whoever thinks that allying with with the outside world will give them strength is mistaken. He who thinks that women are weak is mistaken. He who believes that their transformation sleeps is mistaken. And ever since AMLO started, they said that they were going to transform. This was the 4th transformation of Mexico, and that is essentially what their whole campaign and their whole party is all about. That is what she means by the transformation.
It's not just
the transformation into socialism.
It's not just Sheinbaum. The United States government and Trump is saying this as well. So he very often talks about the 4th turning or the 4th revolution.
But this is completely different.
Yeah, I understand that, but this is a common thing that's happening in politics.
But no, it's not, because again, if you need to know and be fully informed on Mexican politics to fully understand where that concept comes from and why they're using it.
It's not in English, so we don't need to play it.
Okay, but there's subtitles.
Calm down.
There's subtitles. Do you want me to read the subtitles?
No, it's fine. You read what she said there. That was it.
But I think she said more stuff than that.
Okay.
But no, equating Claudia Sheinbaum and that kind of transformation with what Trump talks about is very different, because here it's coming from a context of what has happened in, for example, Maduro's Venezuela or Cuba.
There's something called the 4th turning that's happening globally right now.
Yes, but that is not what she means.
Okay, let's go into the next article here.
Now we're moving on to the infighting that continues within the conservative faction of the United States with the Tucker thing, the Nick Fuentes thing, etc. And Matt Walsh apparently has just dropped a nuke on Nick Fuentes. I have decided to pronounce his last name in actual Spanish because he is part Mexican. Thank God Nick Fuentes represents a dying ideology. He should be ashamed.
And I don't necessarily agree with this. And if this is, and this seems to be not only the belief of him, but of Ben Shapiro. Nick Fuentes is now actually the largest political commentator online. So for him to think that this is a dying ideology, they're not taking it seriously. And this is how, when you underestimate your opponent, it can sometimes win. Not that I'm on either side here. I like a lot of Nick Fuentes' arguments because it is America first, but a lot of those arguments are in contradiction. And I definitely don't like Ben Shapiro and how he's trying to censor everybody. Matt Walsh here actually works for Ben Shapiro. That being said, Matt Walsh, I think there's still a lot of hope for him.
And he has been quite independent, but again, I do agree that a lot of what Nick is saying has been said before and has not worked as well.
Well, and also,
and he doesn't really understand where his ideology is even coming from.
He's openly starting to support socialism, and with digital ID and digital currency on the uprise, it's extremely dangerous because it actually has the tools to turn into communism if that socialism fails, and socialism is becoming very popular. We need this younger generation just doesn't understand how dangerous socialism is and how if it goes wrong, it can turn into communism.
Or into this Nazis, which is what Nick Fuentes has been suggesting, and not even implicitly, that he wants National Socialism. That's where the name Nazi comes from.
One of these days, you're going to grow up and become a man. And when you do, you're going to look back with remorse and embarrassment on the time you spent advocating white supremacy and crying on the internet when someone criticizes bigotry and mass murder. That's going to happen in the future. You're going to look back on yourself using phrases like race traitor, and you're going to be so embarrassed. And you're going to go out begging for forgiveness. Fuentes and his people, they represent a dying, thank God, a dying ideology. But the problem is, as that ideology dies, as that worldview dies, it apparently is determined to take out as many innocent people with it as it can. And so that's my concern.
And the problem is it is not dying. It's actually on a massive rise. The ideology that is dying is actually Ben Shapiro's ideology, the Christian Zionist ideology. It went from a 60% approval rating down to 7 amongst the youth. And even amongst older people, it went from a 70% approval rating to a 50%. So to underestimate what's kind of going on with Nick Fuentes is dangerous, and to think that they're stronger than they are, and not realizing what the polling is actually saying right now, especially when the socialist right, which is Nick Fuentes, is trying to reach out to the socialist left.
Which is an oxymoron.
Which could be extremely dangerous if you have a right-left unification under socialism.
On the extreme far left.
With digital ID and digital currency on the rise as well.
Within the extreme poles of the factions.
But I will say, although I might disagree with a lot of Nick Fuentes, he does have some of the sexiest arguments when it comes to very specific issues. And in an age where it's all clips, this is why people are drawn to him. He's like perfectly made for this generation. He can talk for hours, but people aren't watching the hours, they're watching the clips. And he makes very, very good arguments when it comes to certain political issues. I think we have one of them.
Yes, but before we go into the actual clip, now I forgot what I was going to say. I'll quickly read from Psychics. He says, they seem to be hijacking talking points from the traditional right wing, the Morena party from Mexico. Kind of, but at the same time, again, I also think it's from those that they admire, like Maduro, like Che Guevara, like all of the left insane lunatics that we have had in Latin and South America. And Morena is just another crop of that exact same ilk, and that does come through with a lot of different influences, but still listening to the globalist and UN plans. Now on Nick and on what's going on with America First and MAGA, I think losing Charlie Kirk, and it is something, well, after Charlie Kirk was assassinated and he was taken out way before his time, he was the one unifier of all of these things and was the rational one that was able to quell and bring together and debate and actually talk with all of the factions. As I mentioned, I think it was Monday, it is starting to become the ship of Theseus. And after how many changes and after how many ideological shifts that we see and infighting that we see, can we still call that ship the ship of MAGA or the ship of America First? And what do these things actually mean now that, number one, there's no Charlie Kirk, but number two, we see more and more disaffected Gen Zers, not only with the left and with what they have been indoctrinated with, but now also with Trump and with the promises that Trump is making without actually taking into consideration the future or what Gen Z actually is looking for, who is continuing to be more and more influential and who Nick Fuentes unfortunately talks to.
Well, I would also say Christian nationalism is really on the rise in a massive way. Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Nick Fuentes, and there's more, but I'm going to just use these three as an example. Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens are talking about Christian nationalism in a way, but they're not talking about socialist Christian nationalism. Nick Fuentes is openly the only one talking about social Christian nationalism, and you have to wonder if this is a broader movement that actually involves Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and other in this Christian nationalist movement. But Nick Fuentes is really the only one kind of saying it, and furthermore, reaching out to the far, far left to try to make this new movement. And to really put it in context, when we've seen Mamdani and Trump together and they really got along, Trump may know that this vein of Christian nationalist socialism is on the uprise.
And as we also discussed, Nick Fuentes doesn't seem to fully understand what he's preaching or even what the United States of America was founded on, what the founding fathers and the Constitution were built upon, that the Christianity and the Christian nationalism that was entrenched within the U.S. and within the building of the U.S. does not compute and does not align with his Catholicism, because Catholicism looks to the Vatican and it always has that external, arm of faith and power.
And the Vatican is extremely globalist.
So exactly. And the Vatican has become, ever since Vatican II, but even beforehand, and we've seen it in Latin and South America, even more entrenched than we see it in other countries, but also Italy, etc. We have seen that arm of socialism is alive and well within the Vatican and within the Catholic Church, if you were taking the Catholic Church as it is and what it actually means and represents, which I think, and we talked about a base camp episode where they analyzed and contrasted what Nick says and what he says and espouses and thinks he believes versus what would actually work within the context of the U.S. and how the U.S. was founded and the principles that it is founded upon that Nick says he wants to espouse and wants to uphold. However, his own religion and what he's seeking goes completely against that. That thing that he says he wants to do.
Who's supposed to take over the MAGA movement or who's supposed to run after Trump is J.D. Vance. He is a Christian nationalist, and I think he understands this vein of Christian national socialism that's coming up, and he's realizing the threat isn't actually the Democrats in the next election or in 2028, maybe in the midterms, but in 2028, this Christian nationalist socialist movement is really the threat. So it's going to be very interesting to see Christian nationalist capitalism go against Christian nationalist socialism, and they could potentially divide the vote amongst J.D. Vance, and that would lead a path for the Democrats to actually win.
And unfortunately, with socialism, and that is why, in a sense, it is very attractive to younger people, is that on the surface, and when it first starts to be implemented, and with the just positives being shown, it sounds great, and it sounds like the way to move forward and to actually solve everyone's problems. The problem is, once it's actually in place, and we've seen it with small examples also just within the Western world, in Canada, the health system, in the UK, the health system, and other small segments where there are socialist mechanisms that work within the country, it actually, once applied, doesn't work in the long run, and it can never work because of the way it is designed, the way that ideology and that current is designed. It doesn't work.
This isn't a normal time in history where we can just try socialism out. They're going to be bringing a digital ID and digital currency in. Those two mechanisms will turn that socialist movement into a communist movement, and it's extremely dangerous. I do hear Nick Fuentes talking about how he absolutely loves Stalin and things like that. Trying socialism at this point in time is very dangerous. If you do try socialism, it has to have a capitalist foundation, and the United States is already involved in this with food programs, with healthcare programs. It's fine as long as capitalism is the base, but you cannot make socialism the base. It only can be used sparingly within capitalism. Otherwise, it's going to take over capitalism and then drive towards communism with a digital ID and a digital currency.
And yes, Fuentes continues to, number one, ignore that, but also continues to say that let's get rid of the free market. That is what the right has to give up, and
But
that's the concession that the right has to do.
I do
Which is insane.
I do appreciate Fuentes speaking his mind. He's the only one
Yes.
talking about Christian nationalism, socialism, and I think a lot of these other people just are afraid to say it. At least you know what he's trying to do, where he's coming from. So if you listen to him,
And how retarded
you
it
can
is.
either speak against it or show the errors of the ways. But if you didn't know that was coming, and then all of a sudden he reaches out to the far left, it makes sense, and then they unify, there's going to be no way to really stop that.
But I do,
So-
and I do encourage, and we've criticized the other side of the conservatives and of the political commentators and pundits that don't want to debate him, don't want to platform him, think that that's dangerous. It's even more dangerous to let this fester and not debate it and not actually break down like Basecamp did why his point and why his position is completely, number one, oxymoronic, also moronic and retarded, all at the same time.
Well, there's a huge debating conference going to go on called World War Debate. It's going to be done by Andrew Wilson, who is one of the best debaters as far as Christian nationalism goes. He actually has a relationship with Nick. So I would actually love to see Nick debate somebody else.
Yes.
That would be absolutely fantastic. If they can get Nick and Ben Shapiro to debate at that event, it would be the biggest event ever. And it's supposed to be a one-off debate event, but if it goes well, I'm thinking it will go annually. Also, they did put out a $30,000 offer to Steven Crowder and Candace Owens. To
debate.
And they are very much in the social media sphere, so they knew who these big debaters are within politics. And it's set up to be a great platform. It's called World War Debate if they can get the right people to debate.
But I was going to say also, as chisme or gossip, Candace Owens and Steven Crowder are infighting over some of the things that Candace Owens has been, let's just say, talking, if not fabricating about with the Charlie Kirk assassination and other things as well. And Steven Crowder has been trying to debate her and talk her down from the ledge of stupidity that she's currently standing on. I like her on a lot of things she's done. With this, I do think she's on the ledge of retardation, about to just jump off, if she hasn't jumped off already. But again, World War Debate, Andrew Wilson decided to invite both of them, Steven Crowder and Candace Owens, political pundits or commentators, journalists, whatever you want to call them, to debate each other on these points. And while Steven Crowder had said yes and had accepted, and there was a $30,000 apparently appearance fee offer, Candace Owens had declined. Andrew Wilson ended up telling Crowder that she wasn't going to do it. Then he upped the offer and said, I'll give my speaker's fee to Candace Owens if she'll debate me, if she'll actually appear with me. And same as what I say with the people that don't want to debate Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens should be open to have her ideas debated and, maybe broken down.
Well, this World War Debate
true.
event is actually seeming to have big money behind it, or big enough money to actually bring the most controversial, and have the biggest debate topics actually done in a very high production way. This could bring debating to the next level. TPUSA is the one that kind of pushed debating to the forefront, but not in a way like this World War Debate's going to do, with the production value, with the names possibly, and with the topics. If they can have the right topics and the right people debating it, man, especially going into the midterms and the 2028 elections, rather than censorship, we're going to be going full-fledged into free speech. It will have an add-on effect of bringing debate really into the mainstream. Right now, it's something that I love to watch, but it's not done in a very impactful way on a lot of these online platforms. I think we could see the revolution of debate, just like independent media had a huge impact on the 26 election. Debate could have a huge impact on the 2028 election.
But now let's see Nick Fuentes try to explain the fracturing within the GOP. So from Fractured Light, Nick Fuentes explains in depth what the civil war within the GOP is really about. Great old party.
You don't need to read it. It's quite the long clip. We'll play it at a faster speed. That being said, he makes very, very good points on very specific issues, and he's very much in contradiction on a lot of his other points, like Christian nationalism and the Catholic Church, which is the globalist organization because of the Pope and a lot of the cardinals. I don't want to go towards globalism in any way, shape, or form. But on this, I think he made a good point. We won't play it all, but let's hear it.
And I think it's basically undeniable at this point. It is a true civil war. And it's a civil war very clearly about one issue.
Oh, pause it.
People can say,
I actually did disagree with him on this. I don't think it's about this one issue, but they want to try to make it about this issue. If money is pulled away from Israel, the next country is going to be Jordan and then Egypt. It's America first, and he won't say that. He won't say, well, he does say America first, but he says, oh, it's just the funding with Israel. Really, they want to put the American citizens first, and that was Trump's promise. And that is the real goal, I think, of the American First movement, at least how it stands right now. But saying it's just Israel, it's not just Israel.
And I do agree with that. And because of the Israel derangement syndrome, a lot of people are missing that point and missing that the voters don't even care that much about Israel. It's about the external funding and the not funding of the citizens as they said they were going to be doing.
whatever they like about it. Some people are not my biggest fan. And people can say it's about clips from my show. It's about evil. It's about Hitler. It's about the Nazis. It's about whatever. People can say whatever they like. But we all know, everybody knows, on the right and the left, the young and the old, everybody knows this MAGA civil war, it's literally about one issue and one issue only. And that is U.S. support for Israel. That's it. Period. End of story. That is what has been driving this from the very beginning. And it is based on a fundamental contradiction that once you understand what this is, it's not hard to see why this civil war, not only its nature, but why it was inevitable. The contradiction at the center of all of this is that Donald Trump ran in 2016 on a very simple message.
Now he's going to get into the real issue, which is America first. And I think this is the part he's actually right on. I think he's misrepresenting that it's just about Israel, because I think it's about funding a lot of other countries and never-ending wars.
2 words, America first. That is what he said throughout the campaign in 2015 and 2016. He said America first. And in particular, how was that ideology expressed? In the most concrete way, America first was relevant in Trump's critique of the war in Iraq. Trump said that invading Iraq under false pretenses, the accusation that Saddam Hussein had amassed weapons of mass destruction, he said this conflict was ruinous for the United States. This was an America last war. All kinds of money and energy and attention and investment went behind this when it could have went somewhere else. It could have went into rebuilding our own country, our own infrastructure, our own institutions. Instead, it went overseas. And so this is the kind of grievance. This is the message. This is both the abstract and concrete message that actually rallied the Republican base around Donald Trump against 16 other primary candidates in the very beginning in 2015. It's because Trump, contra Jeb Bush, and Marco Rubio.
That's pretty good. But I think he's bang on that the America First movement is stop funding foreign wars, stop funding foreign countries, and focus on America. That being said, he's wrong when he says it's just about Israel. That's kind of how it emerged. But as soon as they can get the money stopped for Israel, you have to realize Egypt gets almost $2 billion. Jordan gets $2 billion. There's literally billions of dollars the American government's giving out all around the world. Mm-hmm. That being said, I'm not so naive to say you can just stop giving out foreign money. And why do I say that? I've been thinking about this for days. And the U.S. has the world's currency. They have to have money flowing around the world. That's why this money has to be given out, but it doesn't have to be given out with the way that it is. But if they want to maintain the world currency, they do. They do have the option, though, of having an internal currency and an external currency. And that's currently being floated and talked about within the Trump administration. But I would like Trump to focus on America first, just like the Canadian Prime Minister should focus on Canada, and the Mexican president should focus on Mexico. And the Europeans, well, they need to get rid of the European Union and start focusing on their own countries individually.
Mm-hmm. But the U.S. is, as you were saying, kind of, for some reason, the U.S. House is running scared of socialism, and they decided to put it up for a vote now. And I agree with them. I agree that it shouldn't be implemented, but still, it was kind of random, especially now that it's kind of being talked about more and more. So maybe that's where it's coming from.
Because socialism is becoming a thing on the right because of Fuentes, and then it's already big on the left, and now Fuentes is talking about reaching out to the left. I think Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are realizing in 2028 the threat could actually come from socialism that's within the right.
So from Eric Doherty, U.S. House votes to denounce socialism and formally oppose all implementation of socialism nationwide. 285 to 98 voted yes. The majority of Democrats opposed it, of course, because that's their last bastion for the Democrats. Their last bastion is to continue to promise socialism to the people that just continue to support them and to side with their more radical base.
No, let's wait here. We have 285 to 98. The 98 that didn't vote for it is the socialist wing of the Democratic Party. So they're openly against it, but to get 285 votes, actually, a lot of the Democrats voted with this thing. So you're having a portion.
86 voted yay, 98 voted nay.
What you're seeing is potentially the traditional uniparty try to have a unified front against socialism, along with a lot of the MAGA wing as well. But you're seeing socialism become a real problem for both parties right now. But having a vote like this that doesn't actually do anything, it's very interesting that they even had this vote.
Mm-hmm. Again, I think it is the threat that they don't talk about. And it's dangerous as well because of the young people that are directionless and they see no future. They see in the US and in a lot of countries. I mean, here we had the Gen Z protests, but in a lot of countries, the youth are sick and tired of the boomer generation continuing to take away everything that they could have, but like hoarding it all for themselves and hoarding all of the positions in power, hoarding all of the government positions, hoarding all of the media, hoarding everything. Well, the boomers and in some sense the Gen Xers continue to hold that position of power.
They have no future, so of course socialism...
And they've been left without a future, yes.
They have no future, so socialism, of course, is going to look sexy to them. The problem with that is this isn't a normal time in history. We have digital currency and digital ID. And when you start bringing socialism in, you're going to bring a digital currency in order to fund all this stuff. And then the trap has been set. And socialism is going to quickly lead to communism once it starts to fail. And they're going to start stripping freedoms like freedom of speech, which they already will have a digital ID and they can easily bring in a social credit score on the back of that. So if you're going to vote for socialism in the midterms or in 2028, it's extremely dangerous because digital currency and digital ID is something different and has a different mechanism of control over the population once these socialist ideals are voted into power.
And I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, a lot of the globalist powers that do want to continue to implement digital ID, digital currency, etc., will back whoever is willing to do so and will back socialism further in. So there will be a lot of financing and a lot of more push towards that because that may be the only way they see to implement what they actually want to implement. But worryingly, with the youth from Heartland...
One second. Trump is bringing in a lot of advisors into the White House asking what's going on. Why does it look like I potentially or the Republicans are going to lose the midterm, which would freeze out the second half of his administration? And if he wants to fight the socialist uprising that's coming from both the far left and far right, he's going to have to lean into freedom. And he's going to have to lead and openly say no digital ID, no digital currency, really, really lean hard into being against censorship, which, yeah, he already is in a lot of ways. But he's going to have capitalism really offers maximum freedom. And a lot of people think we're in late stage capitalism. That's why they're looking for the next system. There is no future for them. You're going to have to lean into capitalism very hard, and you're going to have to show the benefits and the freedoms that can bring. But if you're going to run on a platform of capitalism, here's your digital currency, here's your digital ID, I have a sneaking suspicion people are going to start voting for socialism because it already feels like socialism at that point.
And worryingly, again, we have mentioned Trump or the right has a great excuse to implement digital ID, which is the border and border security and just security in general. We have seen them make moves towards that and even speak about that. And there's also that worrying connection between Trump and Ellison, for example, Larry Ellison, who has spoken about how a future with digital ID and social credit scores would look like. It would look like China. But this is even more worrying, again, because the youth see no escape option. And now apparently the escape option is AI, because according to a Heartland Rasmussen poll, and again, Mark Mitchell from Rasmussen met with President Trump at the White House a few days ago, 41% of young voters support giving artificial intelligence sweeping government powers. 41% of likely voters aged 18 to 39 voiced support for a proposal to give an advanced AI system authority to control public policymaking decisions. 36% of likely voters aged 18 to 39 said they would support a proposal that would give AI the authority to determine the rights that belong to individuals and families. That is incredibly worrying, including rights related to speech, religious practices, government authority, and property. 35% said they would support a proposal to give AI authority to control all the world's largest military. And it is that loss of confidence in the current powers that are all corrupt, all infected by boomers and by people that have already led us down the dark path that we're on right now. That's worse.
They sent Trump in there to burn down the system and to be the wrecking ball. They don't think that he's necessarily doing that to the level that they want to burn down the system. They want to get rid of the corruption. There's no way to do it. So they're seeing AI as a way to do this. But there's going to be people that program this AI. There's going to be seen what happened to AI when it first came out, how woke it is.
Bias.
And there was not that much of a incentive with that. When you have AI run the government, there's a mass incentive that will breed corruption. It will be a new system, so the corruption will be minimized in the beginning, but as it goes on, the authoritarian aspects and the corrupt aspects will grow and grow and grow, and AI will have far more ability to have corruption and authoritarianism than even the regular government as we've seen it now. The system we have now has had a mass amount of time to breed the level of corruption it has. I don't know if they can fix the system they have now, but whatever system we go into, we need to maximize freedom for the people. And we see Western countries absolutely stripping freedoms from people worldwide right now.
And again, it does sound like young people now are more willing to give control over to an AI, which is worrying by itself, but also continuing to install that digital, what would it be? Digital socialism, technocratic socialism, which is insane. And that both sides and the extremes and the young people that are on those extremes see as more feasible and better for them than actually doing something that continues with capitalism and the freedoms that people have.
The American system worked so well because it ran on freedom for decades, and the rest of the world seen those freedoms and wanted those freedoms, so they implemented it. Right now, we see Western countries globally absolutely stripping freedoms from their citizens. Therefore, it's really hard to run on this capitalistic platform or the traditional American platform of freedoms. I also think there is duties that need to come with freedoms, and we've lost a lot of those duties over the years.
And responsibility.
So that's why you get rid of all the duties. All you have are my rights, my freedoms, and you have this woke society that is really just falling apart at its absolute core.
And again, those freedoms came through with capitalism and free speech, not censorship, etc. Sidekick says, I like what you're saying, Guy, like with Ukraine, give less. And I think with Israel, give less, let them fight it out. Ukraine, Russia, just let them fight it out. But no, because it's too advantageous for them to continue with the money laundering machine that is war.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good benefits that will come down to the end of this war. There will be money flowing into eastern Ukraine from Russia to build it up, to see what we did, and there's going to be money flowing into western Ukraine to rebuild it as well. You're going to see the Russia-U.S. relations really starts to build economically because the U.S. realizes they need to get Russia away from China at least as much as possible, and the only way to do that is by building economic relations. Right now, they're sanctioned to the hilt, so it's only pushing Russia further and further and further into China's arms.
And Rafa, thank you so much. Rafa says, just a reminder to the kind people watching the stream, please like and subscribe. And I always hate saying that and I always forget but yeah, if you like it, please like it and do subscribe. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers so we can monetize this channel as well and start ramping up production.
And we're almost at 600. So
yes, and thank you so much to everybody that has subscribed and to everybody that comments, because we do like your comments. But let's run through these last few stories quickly because we've been here for a while now.
And we won't go to RUMBLE today because the show ran really long.
Yes.
Okay.
But we are streaming over
on
there.
Both.
Yeah, both. Yeah, we simul stream. From Australians versus the Agenda, the Australian Federal Police has warned all current and emerging individuals and groups that are eroding Australia's social fabric are now on notice for what they say or do online or in person, according to the AFP. adding that the AFP supports freedom of speech, but only if you follow the law.
And if you watch the show over the past week, Australia is bringing in a digital ID, and right on the back of that digital ID, they're releasing a statement like this. This does not build trust amongst your citizens. Citizens do not want digital ID. The way they were able to bring it in Australia was protect the children, strip the rights and freedoms from your citizens.
And that is, and again, we've seen it in several countries, including Canada and Mexico, that is how they're trying to do it.
Let's have the parents protect their children
and give them the authority and the right to do that.
And maximize freedoms for your citizens.
Yes.
There are current and emerging individuals and groups who are eroding our country's social fabric by advocating hatred, fear, and humiliation. And the AFP once again is putting them on notice.
And again, like with Canada and the notwithstanding clause on free speech, like, yes, you have free speech unless you do X, Y, Z. With what here, who defines that hatred? Who defines what hatred is? Who are those groups that you're trying to censor? And what would happen, again, if the other side gets into power and decides to use those same powers that you've granted them to go after you? That is also something nobody ever considered.
This was just common sense for as long as I've been alive. Really, since America's come around, this was common sense. Now they're just absolutely stripping freedom of speech and other things in all these countries. And if a war does break out, a broader war in the European Union, they will absolutely strip all freedoms from their citizens and send them off to war. Because it's a time of war and these countries have special rights in those times. And they're already signaling they want to strip those freedoms from them.
But also specifically with Commonwealth nations who are attached to the UK, they come up with a lot of this stuff almost at the same time.
There is no place for hate or violence in our communities, and the AFP will defend and protect Australia and our future from these threats. There will be no tolerance for groups who advocate or have a propensity for violence. Whether offending occurs online or in person, the AFP will use its unique capabilities and legislation to collect evidence and prosecute those who seek to harm our community.
And he said there's zero tolerance for violence. The problem is they're starting to identify words are violence.
Speech is violence, yes.
The AFP supports freedom of speech and political expression. There are legal ways to amicably communicate and engage in public discourse. But let it be clear, any alleged criminal behaviour, including threats and harassment, will not be tolerated. If you wish to share extremist views that seek to erode the social fabric of our community, the AFP activity this week is a very explicit warning. The AFP will defend and protect Australia and Australia's future from these threats. For any member of extremist groups who engage in criminal activity, know that the AFP is watching you and is ready to take action.
And can now continue to watch them through the installation of that digital ID. But I continue to ask, who defines these terms? Who defines hate speech? Who defines extremist groups?
We know who defines it. And there's an agenda called the 2030 Agenda. They want all this stuff rolled out by 2030. The UK has already let it slip that I think it was 2028. All digital ID will be mandatory. Otherwise, you will lose your job. They wanted to make it look like it was your choice to take up digital ID. That's because they're in phase one. As they go towards phase 2 and then phase 3, it slowly becomes absolutely mandatory if you want to keep your job and your place within society.
Now let's go and see what's happening over at the UK and their universities. And if you didn't know, the Oxford Union is a debate section of Oxford University in the UK. There was a lot of talk when Charlie Kirk was assassinated because the president who had become the president or was going to become the president of the Oxford Union actually wished for more stuff like that to happen and celebrated the assassination of Charlie Kirk. He had debated Charlie Kirk while this guy was wearing sweatpants and Charlie Kirk was wearing a suit. He was not a serious person, but it was another example of what happens when you take away meritocracy and replace it with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and just being able to put on the poster the image that you want to display, but at the same time, it has eroded the Oxford Union, which usually have debates and conversation And the contrast between Charlie Kirk wearing a suit, talking respectfully, and this other guy was insane. And now we continue to see it devolve into insanity.
Well, this is why freedom of speech, especially on social media platforms, are so important. And events like World War Debate are very important because they're at these, when you have these open debates and things on college campuses, one side or maybe even both sides in the future want to shut down certain speakers. And it's you can't even have the debate at that point.
But the Oxford Union was an institution, and it was it had its like centuries almost old, and it was one of the foundational and most interesting aspects and ways of relating and sharing knowledge and ideas within the Oxford system and the Oxford University. And to see it devolve into what it has is it's just a proof of where our society has let itself devolve into, especially in the UK, but also elsewhere.
Yeah.
So let's see, Oxford Union is falling apart because the University of Oxford replaced meritocracy with diversity and inclusion. You cannot debate with the woke because they are literally unreasonable. A once respectable institution is becoming an unpleasant mob of people. This might be loud.
I might just say that I understand there are plenty of people in this room who don't agree with us, who don't like us. But this esteemed establishment is meant to be a bastion of free speech, discussion, and debate. And this example is not any of those things. And I urge all of you, I'm here to tell you my side of an argument. I also attended this university. I was a student here, and I understand that part of the experience of being a student is to be challenged by thoughts and facts and information that you may not agree with or you may not like. But to shout like that, to abuse a speaker who is being respectful and giving you their side of an argument is not the way to achieve better knowledge or understanding of anything. I will give all of the proposition speakers their due.
Okay, I think that might have been it.
Yes.
And it's very important that, like, we're starting to see debates go into private industry now, which may be important because at a private industry, there's money coming in because you're selling tickets, you're streaming that live, so then you can have a security staff so the debate can't be shut down, because when you're holding it at universities, you're having mobs of people literally coming into these events and stopping certain speakers from speaking.
But because of the capture of those universities and institutions and them letting go of meritocracy and the sharing of knowledge and the finding of knowledge and of truth seeking is supposed to be, that's what's supposed to be, what the universities were supposed to be. Is it me, or exactly as the post was saying with the whole diversity point, a lot of the ones yelling, at least on camera, were number one, wearing sweatpants, and you're supposed to dress up for the Oxford Union debates. You're supposed to look presentable, and not just presentable, but like you're investing into your argument by also looking like you want to be there, and we've lost that sense of dressing up and looking presentable. But a lot of those in sweatpants and yelling were diverse, let's just say. So again, what's happening with the eroding of universities and institutions that used to be for the sharing of knowledge and open and free speech and debate is
I think debate is going to come center stage by the time the 2028 elections come in the US. I think there's a lot of minds that were on social media and know that are going to make more and more live events. And I think it's going to have a huge impact come those elections. And the reason I talk so much about the American elections, because they have a huge impact globally.
Speaking of America and SNAP, from Eric Doherty, a bill has been filed banning SNAP dollars from being spent at fast food restaurants. It's insane that people were able to use government money to go to fast food restaurants, but also spend it on Amazon Prime and things like that.
We have to realize this is a state-by-state issue, and federally, they're trying to clean up SNAP, so they're taking sodas and other things away, which is good, and they're currently cleaning up the system and making people reapply. The problem is certain states, and I'm guessing a lot of these are probably Democratic states, are trying to broaden the laws and rules of SNAP benefits.
So there's an alarm that over 500 million has been spent on fast food across multiple states using SNAP benefits.
What we have found is that within the SNAP program, there is a way for certain states to apply for programs that allow those SNAP dollars to go to fast food restaurants. There are currently 9 states that allow that. And what we have found is in just the last 2 years, taxpayer dollars going into SNAP, those SNAP dollars of the amount of $524 million was spent on fast food. We know that we have health issues across the board here in the United States of America. Those SNAP dollars, and I'll remind everybody that the N in SNAP stands for nutrition, should not be going to fast food. What we have found.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I'm going to say this. The fact that they're letting this slide in 8 states already, you're going to have major lobbyists from all these fast food companies pour in billions of dollars to make this a normal thing. Just like in grocery stores, Coca-Cola poured a lot of money into their lobbyists to make sure Coca-Cola was part of SNAP benefits. It needs to be taken off. I believe they have taken it off in many states, but they need to re-look at this SNAP program. Fruits, vegetables, meats, and cheeses, like keep it simple.
And that is my main argument against it, that it should be, because it's a supplemental nutrition assistance program, and it should be a way to help, but also to help get out of it and be able to, fend for yourself or feed yourself eventually. It should be like just a stopgap between you're going through a hard time and now you're better. Now you get off of it.
Well,
and you don't use it to buy burgers and fast food that are just going to make you worse in the long run and not help you get to that point where you can self-sustain.
And with the talk of socialism coming up a lot on this episode, I would say this is one of those social programs, or the socialist style programs, where a lot of programs are already implemented in the United States. They need to clean up these social safety net programs to really maximize the return on them, not just throw money to fast food restaurants or Coca-Cola, or the same kind of corruption lies in the medical industry with the with how America has partially socialized medicine. You need to clean it up. Half of what America spends goes into socialized medicine, yet they have a horribly corrupt system. There's enough money there to actually have a strong social safety net for the society, but you're literally giving it away to millions of immigrants, not to citizens, and you're weakening it by lining lobbyists and politicians' pockets.
And Rafa says about that Oxford Union clip, he says, at my university, students were supposed to study and not gather in mobs to boycott events. And I think particularly in the US, but also Canada and the UK and a lot of other, the UK it's kind of subsidized, so it's different. But in the US in particular, because young students, and that is something Charlie Kirk was adamant about, he wrote a whole book about it, college became a scam and university became a scam. So they weren't even invested or interested. They're having to go because they know that's what they have to do. And they have to spend this money and get in debt just to have that paper that then can help them get a job. And it shouldn't be that way. It should, if you're going to university, in my opinion, you should be going because you want to pursue knowledge or do research about something or become a professor or be really invested in the education that you're getting at that high of a level of an institution.
It's
but
not
most
a high
people
level
don't
anymore.
but that's the thing. Most people don't even need that and aren't even qualified or prepared to be there for the long run. So what do? It turns into this mob situation and this laughable institution that compared to what they used to be, because the people in there and that have been mostly forced to kind of be there if they want a job eventually shouldn't be there in the first place.
The government needs to stop giving out guaranteed loans for college. It created a huge scam, just like in these SNAPs and these other programs where colleges know it's guaranteed money coming from the government to the students, so they can charge more and more and more and more for degrees that are more and more and more worthless every single year. And these institutions are completely captured by socialists, communists, and everything else.
Because they allowed themselves to be, and they removed and they fired everybody that had a contrary opinion or that was able to give just
teachers unions and a lot of other ways it was captured, not just by that one. But let's go into the last couple stories now.
Yes, from Gunther Eagleman, White House just announced that 11 massive companies are breaking ground on brand new factories across America, hiring American citizens to build them. No more shipping jobs to China, real men, hopefully, real steel and real
I'll talk about this before we play the clip, I guess. I go back up to the top there. And I kind of brought this up to show the the trillions of dollars are flowing into the United States, and they're breaking ground on a lot of manufacturing. Manufacturing is starting to flow back. Inflation has slowed greatly since Trump has taken over. The money's coming. Trump thinks this is enough. He thinks capitalism will sell itself, but it's not doing it right now. And it's not working fast enough by the time the midterms get here. He may be frozen out in his second term, but he is actually doing a good job. It just takes time to get $22 trillion. Even if you don't believe in that number and it's 10 trillion, that will still be the biggest investment year the United States has ever had. This will result in jobs in manufacturing. The country is turning around. The problem is people just don't see it and they don't realize that it is working. First he had to slow the bleed. He's now slowing the bleeding. It takes time to build these manufacturing facilities to create the jobs.
Well, and people don't see it on their day-to-day. Like maybe they hear about it, but it's not fully understandable. People don't fully understand it until they see it reflected on their day-to-day lives, and it won't be by the midterms, I don't think, unfortunately. So, and they don't have woke to rely on anymore, and they don't have that fight against woke to rely on anymore. So they have to find something else to.
You're not going to be able to turn the food prices around fast enough either. Even though you've slowed the rate of inflation, it's not coming down quick enough. And now they're desperately maybe wanting to give out checks in order to, it kind of looks like you're buying votes at that point. That being said, you're also having socialism come from the left and the right. The pressure is really on the conservatives in the midterms.
September numbers were absolutely hit out of the park. You know, as you said, a double is very rare. But if you dig down into the details, there's actually proof in the pudding that President Trump's policies are really working. And here's what it is, that there was a big surge in construction workers. And we went back and traced it back to, remember, President Trump said we're going to expense new factory construction. In September, we counted 11 major companies that broke ground on new factories and hired those construction workers. And the reason why that's so positive is that those factories are going to fill up with new workers and start making stuff and so on. And so President Trump's policy of onshoring production, creating...
And it just takes time. But even the building of the manufacturing facilities does add a lot of jobs, especially when you're getting rid of illegal immigration. It's American citizens that are getting those jobs. So it's working already. It's just not going to work fast enough for the midterms. So what is he going to do in the midterms? We're going to have to wait and see. But I'm going to tell you what, everybody's got the knives out, even the people from his own side at this point. And the quickest solution may be to just stop funding from Israel to reunite his base and say, yeah, I am putting America first. I had to get the investment in the United States first, and just explain his position. But he's going to have to do something that can be shown in the short term, and cutting off Israel is probably the easiest way to do that. Even if he doesn't want to completely cut off Israel, having Saudi Arabia give them money on behalf of the U.S. May be the best way to do that.
And Rafa says, it's way worse when you study a crappy and useless major such as philosophy. And I don't know if that's a dig at me, because I did study philosophy and political science in Canada. And I will say I have this thirst for knowledge, but when I was at university, yes, it helped me learn how to research and read a bit better. But honestly, I think I could have done almost a better job just studying by myself what I did study, and actually getting skills for a useful job that would actually have paid a lot more than the things I was able to find after I graduated in Canada, where there were no opportunities.
You wouldn't have had all the pizza and beer and all the fun.
and all the wokeness that I was able to escape. But yes.
Okay, let's go into the last story of the day here.
And hopefully YouTube doesn't get mad at us, because this is part of and one of the greatest examples of the disgustingness of the death cult that is the left.
This was supposed to be on RUMBLE. Yes. That's why I put it at the end.
So we'll have to measure our response to this, but believe us, at least me, I'm angry. Scotland's new abortion proposals are extreme. They would allow abortion up to birth for mere social reasons, including wanting a son, not a daughter. That means ending a living little unborn girl who can hiccup, suck her thumb, etc., and recognize her mom's voice. And again, this is the death cult in Canada. It's just called MAID, etc.
Yeah, in Canada, you can have abortions right up to the time of birth, too. Somehow
in some provinces.
They keep that under the radar somehow.
Yes.
Well, the Scots want to do their own thing and change their abortion law and making it one of the most extreme situations, not only compared to the UK, but in the world. Now, bear in mind that most EU nations cap their abortion limit for most reasons about 12 weeks of pregnancy. We already cap 24 weeks, which is about almost 6 months of a baby's life. And now the SNP, the Scottish Government, have commissioned a report to suggest that they allow abortion all the way up to birth for most social reasons.
And this is not just women aborting a baby, but the doctors would be allowed to do it.
Well, exactly. In fact, they would have to be normally.
And yeah, after the babies, they give birth and the baby's lying on the table alive, the woman will be able to go into the other room, discuss with the doctor if they want to end that baby's life, which is crazy.
In a situation where there was an abortion taking place up to birth, it would be very extreme circumstances, and it would have to be signed off by 2 doctors. These proposals weaken that just to be signed off by 2 healthcare professionals who say that a social reason would be enough. And now, obviously, that's caused quite a bit of controversy because a social reason could include, well, I wanted a son rather than a daughter. This is a problem we see actually in many parts of the world. In Asian cultures, that's been caused a big kind of gender skew in their populations. And there's concern that such a step would be a regressive. Scotland's supposed to be a kind of progressive feminist country, and now we're allowing people to kill children just because they are female. It's really quite shocking.
And also in the name of feminism, being able to kill, because in China it was, yes, the one child policy, one child system, and in a lot of other countries it's because they, not that it's excusable, but they prefer a boy rather than a girl because that way they can have more farmhands, etc. And there is this massive killing of little baby girls because they're inconvenient to the society that they're going to be born into.
No, it's because the daughter, you lose the daughter to your family, but the son makes your family larger, so it strengthens the family name.
Yes, whatever. But for this to be in the name of feminism and progressivism and abortion rights is even more egregious, in that they're not I mean, she kind of did, but that they're not painting it in this way. And the fact that this is even allowed to be proposed and thought to be a good idea is,
I think this is
I think the way it's going to continue to go.
Every time abortion comes up within the United States, it's a big election issue. The left thinks this is their big winning issue. I think over time, and as we see in the next 5, 10, and 15 years, this is going to be a losing issue for the left. Pro-life, I think this is one of the big issues people don't realize is going to massively shift, especially as birth rates drop.
And also as truth is able to now be highlighted more on social media platforms, on education platforms, on campuses, and speakers have more and more been allowed, pro-life speakers have been allowed to, raise the actual concerns and give the actual truth of not only what happens during those procedures, but the negative effects it has on society itself and on women individually too.
Well, I also think the way this debate kind of shifts is, when does life actually start? And if countries start allowing doctors to end the life of babies once they're on the table, actually breathing outside of the womb, there's no argument for that. And I think that is a big wake-up call that is going to really create a shift and maybe outlaw abortion entirely. That would be great if that happened.
But the wake-up call could also just be that most of the medical community and consensus, at least within the US, but also in Europe and most countries, is that life begins at conception. That is when the unique DNA strands are formed, and it's not like it's going to grow up to be a dog. Like that is when it is human.
Yeah, but on the right, it's constantly, that argument is constantly made, and then the left it always wants to say until it's out. And if they actually start ending the life of a baby once it's outside of the womb, I think a lot of people open their eyes and say, why were we even having this debate? And it's going to push it back all the way until the abortion is absolutely illegal. And you have the argument of the birth control pill as well.
And let's not forget that from Planned Parenthood, the founder was Margaret Sanger, and she was into some real iffy things, and there was a reason why she wanted.
Eugenics was a huge
We can't
thing.
say that word on YouTube.
Oh, I just did. Okay, let's end the show now.
But Psychic says, despicable and infuriating. This is what their ideology gives for natural selection. And I do think, again, I mean, I do agree with Simple a little bit when he says that the left will destroy itself and will end itself by its own policies and with its own.
Well, let's talk about school. I mean, they're going to end themselves because they're aborting their own children. The issue is they want your children, and that's why they're going after the schools, and they're trying to capture the young minds. That's why the government wants to be the parents, and they want to strip parents of their parental rights.
And it's governmental misplaced motherhood with a lot of these cases. So They will find a way to get children and to become even more paternalistic of everybody. But it is Friday, so we hope you have a great weekend. Please do like and subscribe, as Rafa said. Thank you so much to Rafa, Psychic, and let me remember the name, TN3 for commenting. Do remember to comment because we do like to read them. We do like to discuss and debate with you as well and to make you part of the show. Otherwise, it makes no sense for us to be here.
Oh,
so.
and are you going to go on your Spanish show?
Yes, and I do have my Spanish show tonight at 9:30 Mexico City time. I'll see you there if you speak Spanish. I will touch on not just Mexico like I have been for the past few days, but a few other topics and news items. It's a bit more relaxed and it usually goes pretty long.
Well, and the dog was really good today. She didn't bark. This is the first time.
Because we yes. So have a great weekend. Please like, subscribe, and we'll see you back on Monday here in English.
Adios.